Chapter 1473. Lu Yi downed the wine in his cup and rubbed the cup lightly with his fingers. He pondered for a moment and said, "Unparalleled then. This place will be called Unparalleled Island from now on." Chu Shen shook his head. "Unique in the world, unparalleled in the world." He gave Lu Yi a thumbs up. "Good name. I'll listen to senior brother. From now on, this will be Unparalleled Island." Lu Yi did not comment on his bottomless bootlicking. The reason why he took the name Wushuang, Lu Yi actually had his own considerations, because his current identity was announced to the outside world as Li Taibai of the Wushuang continent. If the minor constellation palace hall could transform this deserted island into a spiritual island, then in the future, he could find an opportunity to bring all the people from the 9 prefectures over and let them cultivate here. With the name Wushuang, it would make them feel closer to him. Second, don't recruit ordinary constellations anymore, Lu Yi said. There were already more than 20 people recruited from Unparalleled Island. However, these people did not have a sense of belonging or identity with the Unparalleled Palace. No matter how many people there were, it was useless. Moreover, their strength was not high. These people were more than enough to build the foundation of the Unparalleled Palace. Chu Shen nodded. "Senior brother is right. We've stopped recruiting. I've asked Lucky Star to keep an eye out for Yu Yao on Zhaolei Island. Unfortunately, there has been no news. It would be strange if there was news. Which Yu Yao would be willing to come to such a deserted place? Yu Yao were the mainstays of the various spiritual islands on the Thousand Manifestation Sea. The Unparalleled Palace had just started. They had no strength and no reputation. Naturally, no one would be willing to come. Moreover, the monthly salary that Chu Shen could offer would not be too high. Third, set up the formation on the island as soon as possible. Chu Shen was stunned. However, he agreed readily. "I'll arrange it." Originally, he had planned to build the foundation of the Peerless Island first. As for the formation, it didn't seem to matter whether it existed or not. After all, it was a deserted island, and no one would attack it. What was the use of a formation? It would be a waste of spiritual jades. However, since the pharaoh had said so, he could only do as he was told. "Senior brother, do you have any other instructions?" Chu Shen asked. Lu Yi shook his head. "No." "Then I'll take my leave." Chu Shen stood up and said goodbye. Just as he turned around, he heard Lu Ye's voice behind him. "You left something behind." Chu Shen was startled and hurriedly turned his head to look. He saw that there was indeed an additional item in front of where he had been sitting. When he saw what it was, he was overjoyed. "This treasure cannot be lost. Thank you, senior brother." He hurriedly bent down to pick it up and walked out of the cave to take a closer look. Sure enough, it was a twin chi and branches array disc. His heart was filled with joy. Previously, he had asked Jiao Yen for a twin chi-connected spirit array disc, but it had been cut off by Lu Yi. Now, it was obviously impossible for him to ask for a second one. He had been worried about where to find another one, but now he had one. How could he not know that the Esperanix pharaoh had purposely given it to him as a form of compensation? Array discs were created by Esperanix, so he naturally had a lot of them. "Senior brother Chu." Crooked Teeth Qiao suddenly came up to greet him. Chu Shen put away the disc array and looked towards her. Seeing Crooked Teeth's expression seemed to be a little excited, he did not know what good thing she encountered and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" Crooked Teeth Qiao said, "Senior brother Chu, feel it carefully. See if there is any difference between here and a few days ago?" Chu Shen did not understand, but still immersed his mind and carefully felt it. After a moment, his expression could not help but become serious. He looked at Crooked Teeth Qiao with incomparable astonishment and said in surprise, "Starry sky energy?" Crooked Teeth Qiao fiercely nodded, "Yes, starry sky energy." Chu Shen's eyes widened and looked around. It can't be. His luck could not be so good, right? He randomly chose a deserted island that no one cared about and it actually turned into a living place? There were many islands on the Wanxiang Sea. Generally, they were divided into 2 types, spirit islands and deserted islands. Spirit islands were generally islands with starry sky energy. Deserted islands were islands without starry sky energy. Putting aside the deserted islands for now, other than being a place for cultivators to stay, they had no value. But there were good and bad spirit islands. Some spirit islands did not have rich starry sky energy and could not even satisfy the most basic cultivation of cultivators. Because the starry sky energy was very thin, but some good spirit islands not only had rich starry sky energy, they could even breed spirit jade mines. And these higher quality spirit islands were all occupied by the top forces or galaxies. Ordinary people could not interfere at all. But spirit islands and deserted islands were not unchanging. Some spirit islands did not know why the starry sky energy dissipated and the spirit veins dried up. On the contrary, some deserted islands suddenly burst with vitality. Under the circumstances that no one knew, starry sky energy was born and slowly turned into spirit islands. This process of turning a deserted island into a spirit island was called turning into a living place by cultivators. It was like being reborn from death. Chu Shun could be sure that Wushuang Island did not have any starry sky energy before. But today, after careful sensing, he actually felt the existence of starry sky energy. Although it was very thin, it was undoubtedly starry sky energy. This was obviously a sign that the deserted island was turning into a living place. His heart trembled. If that was the case, then this deserted island was not a worthless place. Although he did not know how far it would turn into a living place, as long as it was related to a spirit island, it had great value. Suddenly, he remembered the 3 things that Pharaoh instructed him to do. The last one was to quickly set up a large formation on the island. He did not understand why Pharaoh instructed him to do so. But now, it seemed that Pharaoh had already sensed the subtle changes in Wushuang Island. Setting up a large formation in advance could prevent the starry sky energy from dissipating. Secondly, it could prevent external enemies from coveting the island. If Wushuang Island was just a deserted island, there was naturally no need to consider these. But it was turning into a living place, there was no need to consider more. Pharaoh was indeed far-sighted. Thinking about it, Chu Shun asked in a low voice, "Other than you, who else sensed it?" Crooked Mouse said, "Everyone should have sensed it." Chu Shun thought about it and agreed. Constellation realm cultivators were very sensitive to starry sky energy. He did not sense it previously mainly because the starry sky energy was still very thin and he did not sense it carefully. Others would be able to sense it if they paid attention. Call junior sister Xiao Dai and the Xingyu sisters. Set up the large formation on the island first. Everything else can be delayed. Chu Shun quickly instructed. Crooked Mouse also knew that this was a serious matter. He immediately nodded and turned to leave. Obviously, he was preparing to set up the formation. Chu Shun stayed where he was. Suddenly, he felt a blissful worry. If Wushuang Island was really turning into a spirit island, Wushuang Palace would definitely not be able to protect it. Even with Pharaoh guarding it, it would not be enough. Although Pharaoh was powerful, he was still alone. Hence, he still needed to recruit people. However, he did not need those at the early stage of Constellation Realm. He had to find people with power and influence. He took out a musical note and sent a message to Lucky Star, who was guarding Zhaolai Island, to give him some instructions. At the same time, Lu Yi also took out his own musical note and sent a message out. "You there?" The other party replied quickly. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, I will not chat. I am very busy." After not seeing him for so many days, the old man's temper had risen. Moreover, what could this old man possibly do? Even though his cultivation was mediocre, he didn't have much lifespan left. Anyone could tell with a single glance that Yu Yao wouldn't be able to make a name for herself on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Therefore, Lu Yi reckoned that Yu Yao would still be wandering around after arriving here. No force would be willing to accept him. "I will find something for you to do. Go to Zhaolai Island and find a woman from Wushuang Island who looks weak and delicate. Tell her that you are willing to be recruited. Well, if you can't find Wushuang Island, find Domineering Qi Island." Tang Jun replied, "I am very busy every day. I am so busy that I can't split myself. Do I need you to find something for me to do? What, Wushuang Island or Domineering Qi Island? I have never heard of them." I will not go. Then don't regret it. I am afraid that the Qingli Taoist world will not have a share of the good things here in the future. Lu Yi finished speaking and kept his musical note. Somewhere in the Wanxiang Sea, Tang Jun, who was flying in the starry sky, immediately stopped. If Li Taibai had said something trivial, he would not have cared at all. If he had found the way home, he would have cared. However, if he had brought up the Qingli Taoist world, he could not help but be concerned. He could not figure out what good things Li Taibai was talking about. Tang Jun could not help but send a message to ask, but there was no reply. Tang Jun cursed angrily. He took out the star map, found the location of Zhaolai Island, and sped towards it. Since he had nothing to do, it was not a big deal to go and take a look. He thought that Li Taibai would not fool him about such things. Even if he was fooled, he could just leave directly. There was no loss. He hurried to Zhaolai Island and saw a large number of cultivators gathered there. Many of them had signs in front of or beside them. It was a dazzling sight. Tang Jun had been here a few times before and had been recruited. However, when they saw that he was so old and did not seem to have many years left to live, they all rejected him. This made him feel rather sad. Lu Ye's guess was right. Ever since he came to the Wanxiang Sea, Tang Jun had been in a state of idleness. He was not involved in the opening of the Constellation Hall, and he could not get involved in Yu Yao's affairs. He was extremely bored. He thought of the Peerless Island or Domineering Aura Island as he searched among the crowd. After a while, he saw a delicate-looking woman. The sign beside her was the recruitment notice for Domineering Aura Island. At this moment, this weak-looking woman was talking to another petite woman. Tang Jun walked forward and heard that the two of them were talking about the rewards for being recruited. He stood quietly at the side and waited. After a while, the two women finished their discussion. The delicate-looking woman looked very happy. Lucky Star had already noticed Tang Jun. He turned around and looked at him. Is there something you need? Tang Jun stroked his beard with one hand and pointed at the sign beside her. I'm here for this. As he spoke, he slightly circulated his spiritual power. Yu Yao's mid-stage cultivation was clearly visible. Lucky Star was stunned. She had never thought that she would be so lucky one day. She had just received Chu Shen's message and changed the recruitment notice, and not only did she immediately attract a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, she even had Yu Yao deliver herself to her doorstep. End of chapter. Chapter 1474. When the Constellation Hall first opened, although the Lucky Star's name had been given to her, in reality, she had nothing to do with luck. Instead, she had been plagued with bad luck. The main reason she had chosen this name was to ward off bad luck and see if it could change her bad luck. However, it was not very effective. Until today, a late-stage Constellation senior martial sister had been recruited, and now, Yu Yao. The Lucky Star's eyes were slightly moist. Senior, are you really here because you were recruited? Of course. Tang Jun nodded. The Lucky Star did not dare to be negligent. He displayed his utmost sincerity and began to negotiate with Tang Jun. He had thought that Yu Yao's conditions would be difficult to satisfy, but who would have thought that she did not have any special requirements? She accepted all the conditions he offered. For a moment, the Lucky Star was at a loss. On the other hand, the late-stage Constellation senior martial sister, who was watching from the side, seemed to have sensed something. After the negotiations were over, the Lucky Star put away his tablet. Gentlemen, I'll bring you to Tyrannical Aura Island. In the past, the Lucky Star had told the early-stage Constellation Masters to find the island by themselves. However, the two people he had recruited this time were different. In order to show his sincerity, he immediately decided to personally lead the way. After leaving Lia Island, Tang Jun immediately summoned his planetary boat when he saw the Lucky Star about to fly over. The Lucky Star landed on it with a red face. Tang Jun was very fast. In less than half a day, they had arrived at Peerless Island. The Lucky Star had already explained the situation on the way back. At this moment, Chu Shen was waiting on the island to welcome them. When he saw that the newcomers were indeed a late-stage Constellation senior martial sister and Yu Yao, he secretly gestured to the Lucky Star that he had done well. He stepped forward and bowed. They greeted each other and introduced themselves. After that, Chu Shen led Tang Jun and the petite woman to walk around the island, explaining his future plans and grand plans. The two of them listened in silence, not making any comments. Although Peerless Island was not small, they finished touring it quickly. Chu Shen was a little nervous. He did not know if the conditions he offered were enough to tempt the two of them to stay. If not, then everything he had done so far would have been for nothing. If the two of you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will not hide anything from you. The unparalleled palace has only just started, and the conditions are indeed a little crude. However, I believe that as long as everyone works together with me, the unparalleled palace will definitely have a voice in the Wanxiang Sea in the future. Tang Jun shook his head slightly. This old man is old, and old Shen has seen a lot of things. This place of new life is full of life. From his words, it was obvious that he was willing to stay. Chu Shen's expression lit up when he heard this. He looked at the petite girl who called herself Bansi. For some reason, even though this was his first time meeting this woman, Chu Shen felt that the pressure she gave him was even greater than that of Tang Jun. Half-Ci smiled. I only have one question. Senior sister, please speak. Chu Shen's expression turned solemn. The junior sister who called me here said that this is Tyrannical Aura Island, and you are called Tyrannical Palace. But from your introduction, why is this unparalleled island and unparalleled palace? Chu Shen heaved a sigh of relief and explained, I felt that the two words unparalleled sounded better than tyrannical, so I changed it. Half-Ci glanced at him and nodded slightly. She did not ask any more questions and said, even though this spiritual island has just started to show signs of life, but if this continues, the future is not bad. This kind of spiritual island is rare. Everyone says that it is unintentional to add flowers to brocade. It is only through providing charcoal in snowy weather that one can see love. I am willing to stay and overcome this difficulty with the palace master. I only hope that when the palace master achieves great success in the future, you will not forget about my efforts. Chu Shen was elated. I will definitely not forget. I am here to thank Senior Sister Bansi and Senior Tang. Half-Ci pursed her lips and smiled. Since we are on the same side, if there is anything you need help with, just give the order. Chu Shen said, there is no need to trouble the two of you with other trivial matters. However, we are preparing to set up the formation on the island. I wonder if the two of you are familiar with formations? Half-Ci said, I know a little. Tang Jun nodded too. I know a little. Then I will ask the two of you to set up the formation. Chu Shen opened his mouth and suddenly thought of something. All right, if the two of you have nothing to do, try not to go over there. Half-Ci glanced over and could not help but be surprised. What is so special about that place? Chu Shen said, that is where a very important guest of mine stays. He likes peace and quiet and does not like to be disturbed. Tang Jun's eyes flashed. Ever since he came here, he had been wondering why he did not see Li Taibai. Now he knew that Li Taibai was hiding there. He could not help but curse silently. This rascal, he brought me here but hid at the side. What was the reason for this? Half-Ci also looked in that direction with interest. Tang Jun was not in a hurry to find Lu Yi. Instead, he started to set up the formation on Wushuang Island with Half-Ci and Crooked Teeth Little. When he said that he had dabbled in the art of arrays, he was undoubtedly being humble. For someone like him who had lived for so many years but had yet to reach the upper level of cultivation, he would start to ponder about some unorthodox ways to pass the time. In terms of the art of arrays, he was undoubtedly an expert. Setting up an array on a spiritual island wasn't too difficult for him. Crooked Teeth Little's level of formations was not enough in front of him. But what made Tang Jun feel surprised was that the girl called Half-Ci's formations were not low either. Every small change actually made him feel enlightened. Just based on this point, Half-Ci's attainment in formations was even higher than his. Tang Jun couldn't help but sigh. After coming to Wushuang Island for a few days, Tang Jun finally found a chance to go to the cave where Lu Yi was. One old and one young, after almost a year, they were reunited. In a year's time, there was not much change in their appearances. But after seeing Lu Yi, Tang Jun was shocked. What happened to your cultivation? He almost suspected that he had sensed wrongly. Because in terms of spiritual power waves, Li Taibai had already reached the later stage of Constellation Realm. How was this possible? When he first met Li Taibai, he was only at the early stage of Constellation Realm. With the help of a red talisman, he killed Qin Yuandai and almost destroyed her family. After that, he chased after them. The two of them were swept into the worm path and came to the Vientiane galaxy. At that time, Li Taibai had advanced to the middle stage of Constellation Realm. Tang Jun was not surprised because he did not know how long Li Taibai had been at the early stage. He only thought that he was at the critical point of advancing to the middle stage. But it had only been 1.5 years since the two of them came to the Vientiane galaxy. 1.5 years to advance from the middle stage of Constellation Realm to the late stage? That was simply a fantasy. But the truth was right in front of him. After sensing carefully, Li Taibai was indeed at the late stage of Constellation Realm. Even though Tang Jun had lived for many years and had seen many things, he was still shocked beyond words. The advancement of a realm was nothing, but Tang Jun knew that Li Taibai not only had a realm, but also had the ability to kill enemies of a higher realm. When he was at the early stage of Constellation Realm, he had killed Zhao Tianmu and forced him to flee back to the Qing Li Dao world. Now that he was at the late stage of Constellation Realm, did it mean that he could even fight Yu Yao? Unparalleled Li Taibai was indeed unparalleled in the world. If such a person did not die, there would definitely be a place for him in this vast galaxy in the future. Tang Jun suddenly felt that he should carefully examine his relationship with this lad. He could not simply treat him as a junior. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Tang Jun said, "You were the one who supported the unparalleled palace. Otherwise, why would he specially call him here?" Lu Yi shook his head. "Not really, it's just a coincidence. I roughly understand why you called me here. This spiritual island is in the process of reincarnation. If it continues, it will definitely be a good place. You want me to occupy a place here in advance. In the future, if people from your world and mine come here, they will have a place to stay, right? That's what I was thinking." Tang Jun shook his head and said, "That's a good idea. But let's not talk about the fact that we can't find the way back. Even if we find it and bring people from our world here, how can you be sure that the palace master of the unparalleled palace will accept them and let them stay here? If this place really becomes a good spiritual island, there will definitely be countless people scrambling for it. By then, it won't be easy to come in again." Lu Yi said, "You don't have to worry about this. I can still guarantee this." His words should still be effective on Chu Shen's side. Taking a step back, even if it didn't work, he could still make use of the minor constellation hall to build another spiritual island. Now, everyone thought that it was the unparalleled island that was reincarnating. But in reality, it was the minor constellation hall that was working. With this treasure in hand, Lu Yi could reincarnate any deserted island he wanted. Tang Jun did not know the relationship between Chu Shen and Lu Yi. However, Chu Shen had previously said that this was the place where a very important guest of his stayed. From the looks of it, the relationship between the two of them should not be simple. He pondered for a while and said slowly, "If you want me to stay here, I can do that. But I have a condition." Lu Yi rolled his eyes and looked at him. He wanted to ignore him. However, on second thought, to what extent the minor constellation hall could transform the unparalleled island, he needed a long time to observe. Yu Yao was not easy to find. Tang Jun was the only person he could find and trust. With Tang Jun here, they could avoid a lot of trouble. Even if they were attacked, they would still have the ability to fight back. Therefore, for the time being, he really had to appease him. "I need a quota for the cultivators of the Qing Li Dao world to enter the unparalleled continent to cultivate at a fixed time." Lu Yi looked at him with a strange expression. "The cultivators of the Qing Li Dao world want to enter the unparalleled continent to cultivate? Why is that?" It was not that they could not go to the unparalleled continent, but what could they cultivate there? The corpse clan was rampant everywhere. In the future, the foundation of the unparalleled continent was bound to be swallowed by the 9 states. When that time came, the foundation of the world would decline and sooner or later, it would become an ordinary world without a cultivation environment. Therefore, Lu Yi did not understand the purpose of Tang Jun's condition. Chapter 1475. There's something wrong with the Qin Li Dao world. Tang Jun did not intend to hide it. It was not a secret, and if Li Taibai agreed to his terms, he would not be able to hide it. After his explanation, Lu Yi finally understood what Tang Jun wanted to do. It had been almost 2,000 years since the Qin Li Dao world was promoted to a large realm. Qin Yuandai and Tang Jun, who were killed by him, were considered the first batch of people to benefit from it. As their realm was promoted, they broke through to the constellation and slowly grew to the Yuyao realm. However, after so many years, although there were many constellations in the Qin Li Dao world, no one else was promoted to the Yuyao realm. Something was obviously wrong. After Tang Jun and Qin Yuandai, only Wu Zhuo was promoted to the Yuyao realm. However, Wu Zhuo was able to do so because he had participated in the Battle of the Deity Ocean at the Reincarnation Tree. He survived the Battle of the Deity Ocean and obtained the opportunity to be promoted to the constellation, so his cultivation path was smooth. Since many years ago, Tang Jun had sensed the problem of this realm. Unfortunately, he did not know the cause until one day, when an expert passed by the Qin Li Dao world and gave him some pointers. Tang Jun then realized the truth. According to the expert, there was something wrong with the Qin Li Dao world. Therefore, after cultivators were promoted to the constellation, no matter how talented they could not break through to the Yuyao realm. In other words, cultivators who obtained the opportunity to be promoted in the Qin Li Dao world could only cultivate to the later stage of the constellation. The Qin Li Dao world was not the only realm like this in the galaxy. There were other similar realms, but there were not many of them. To solve this problem, the only way was to send their cultivators to other realms to cultivate and break through. This way, they would have a chance to go further. This was also the reason why Tang Jun had followed Qin Yuandai to the Wushuang continent. At that time, he thought that if he could take over the Wushuang continent, then the cultivators in this realm would have a way out. However, he did not expect Qin Yuandai to be killed by a red talisman. In the process of chasing after Lu Yi, he was swept into the worm path and ended up in the Wanxiang galaxy. Now that Lu Yi had a favor to ask of him and the two of them were in the same boat, Tang Jun felt that Li Taibai would not refuse such a small request. Of course, Lu Yi would not refuse, but he had a strange expression. "Are you sure you want to send your cultivators to the Wushuang continent to cultivate?" Tang Jun said, "This old man doesn't need many quotas. 1 person per year. This isn't too much, right?" If they really wanted to release them, they would definitely choose cultivators with outstanding talent who had the potential to become Yuyao. There could not be too many of them, so 1 person per year was definitely enough to satisfy the needs of the Qin Li Dao world. It was equivalent to taking up another person's opportunity to be promoted to a constellation. Not at all. Lu Yi nodded. Not to mention 1 person per year, even if it were 10 or 100 people, it would not matter. The Wushuang continent itself was not a good place. His roots were in the 9 states, but there was no need to tell Tang Junyan about this. As for how Tang Jun was going to explain to him when he found out the truth, that was a matter for the future. After the two of them reached an agreement, Tang Jun said happily, "If we can find the way back, we can join forces with the Jade Conch. We can definitely occupy a place on the Vientiane Sea." It was difficult to establish a place on the Vientiane Sea with just the Qin Li Dao world and the 9 states. There were only 2 Yuyao in the Qin Li Dao world, and none in the 9 states. Therefore, if they really wanted a place on the Vientiane Sea, they had to borrow the power of the Jade Conch. Since they came from the same galaxy, they had to act as a team. This was how many weak galaxies survived on the Vientiane Sea. "Do you have any leads on the way back?" Lu Yi asked. Tang Jun shook his head. "I have paid attention to it, but unfortunately, there were no valuable clues. I also went to the insect path a few days ago. It was still a mess. It looks like it won't be stabilized in a short period of time." Speaking of this, Tang Jun sighed helplessly. The galaxy was too big and there were many galaxies. The Jade Conch was remote and unknown. No one had heard of it unless they crossed paths with the Jade Conch. Trying to find out information about the Jade Conch in an environment like the Vientiane Sea was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The old man and the young man were no longer in the mood to chat. Tang Jun quickly left. Not long after Tang Jun left, Lu Yi felt that the restriction he set at the entrance of the cave was disturbed again. This disturbance was not malicious. It was like someone was knocking on the door. Obviously, someone was here to visit. He frowned slightly and used his divine telekinesis to investigate. He found that the person standing at the entrance of the cave was a very petite woman. He had never seen her before. However, someone who would appear on the Peerless Island at this time should be someone recruited by Chushen. Her cultivation was not bad. She was in the late stage of the constellation realm. Lu Yi did not know why she was here. He thought about it and opened the restriction. The woman stepped inside. Soon she was in front of Lu Yi. In the dim environment, the woman sized him up with a pair of big bright eyes. She seemed to be curious. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi asked. The woman shook her head and said, "You must be Palace Master Chu's friend? My name is Bansi. I was recruited by Palace Master Chu. I will be living on the Peerless Island from now on." She acted as if she was familiar with him. Lu Yi was confused. He had no idea what she wanted to do. Bansi asked again, "What's your name?" Lu Yi thought about it and said his name, Li Tai Bai. Bansi nodded slightly. "I will remember it." After she finished speaking, she turned around and walked away leisurely with her hands behind her back. This woman, what was she doing? However, Lu Yi guessed that she was just curious about who was living here, so she came to take a look. It was normal. After Bansi left, Lu Yi took out a musical note. He had 2 musical notes in his hand. One belonged to Li Tai Bai, and the other belonged to Fa Wuzuan. There were not many people he could contact on Fa Wuzuan's musical note. He was going to contact Spectre. During this period of time, with the help of the talent tree's 3 transformations, he had finished deducing the new concealment spirit pattern. Now, there was an additional spirit pattern on the burning leaf of the talent tree. The cost was not small. The fuel consumption of the talent tree was great. However, compared to the time saved, it was nothing. The effect of the new concealment was undoubtedly much stronger than before. Although it might not be comparable to when Spectre activated the ghost pattern, it was not far away. However, concealment always needed to be complemented with aura concealment. Simply concealing one's body was useless. The more powerful a cultivator was, the stronger their spiritual sense would be. If one's body was concealed, one would be easily discovered if one did not conceal their aura. Spectre was undoubtedly proficient in concealment. It was a pity that Lu Yi couldn't pry the breath concealment part of the ghost pattern from her last time. It didn't seem to be a matter of money. Lu Yi was going to try again. If it really didn't work, he could let Spectre inscribe the breath concealment part of the ghost pattern for him to see. It was the same. He didn't have to look at her body. He sent out the message, but there was no response. He didn't know what this woman was doing. After a while, the musical note suddenly vibrated. Lu Yi checked and found that it was indeed Spectre who replied. However, there was no specific information, only a location. Obviously, she wanted him to meet at this location. Lu Yi took out the star map and compared it. After confirming the location, he immediately got up, constructed the spirit pattern, and put on the new concealment. He quietly left the cave and rushed out. Tang Jun, who was setting up the formation, seemed to have sensed something. He glanced in the direction Lu Yi had left. On the other side, the woman named Bansi also raised her eyes and looked in the same direction calmly. After leaving the Wushuang Island, Lu Yi took out the star boat and rushed to the rendezvous point. The location Spectre sent was not too close to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Even though Lu Yi hurried there with the help of the star boat, it still took him 2 full days. There was a huge floating continent here, which seemed to be the debris of a collapsed dead star. The whole floating continent was shaped like a big bowl, with a huge pit in the middle. Lu Yi put away his star boat from afar, changed into Fa Wuzuan's appearance and clothes, and hid his body and breath, and rushed in that direction. He wasn't worried that Spectre would ambush him here. He didn't have much contact with this woman. He knew she wasn't a good person, but he didn't think she would be so despicable. However, Fa Wuzuan's identity was a sensitive matter, so he still had to be careful. He circled around the floating continent from afar, but he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. He also couldn't find any trace of Spectre. "Where is she?" Lu Yi transmitted. Before long, he received Spectre's reply. Coming. After waiting for a while, he saw a figure rushing in his direction. Who else could it be but Spectre? However, when Lu Yi saw the scene behind Spectre, his eyes couldn't help but twitch. This was because he discovered that Spectre was actually being hunted down by someone. And the person chasing after her was Yu Yao. In an instant, Lu Yi saw through Spectre's intentions. No wonder she would choose this place as the rendezvous point. When he contacted her 2 days ago, she was already being hunted down. This woman was really something. Yu Yao was chasing after her, yet she managed to drag it out until now. However, from the looks of it, she didn't seem to be having a good time either. She was in a very sorry state. The fact that a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator could last so long under Yu Yao's pursuit was already a testament to her powerful foundation. She had summoned him here either to divert the trouble away or to join forces with him to kill Yu Yao. However, even though Lu Yi had recently advanced to the late-stage Constellation Realm, he knew that he was no match for Yu Yao. This was because the nature of the energy in a Constellation Realm cultivator's body was completely different from that of Yu Yao's. Back then, the three of them had joined forces to fight the withered skeleton general. Their opponent was a weakened Yu Yao. Even after forming a formation, they still had to expend a lot of effort to kill her. Now, the one chasing after Spectre was a mid-stage Yu Yao, who was many times stronger than the withered skeleton general. How could the two of them possibly defeat her? Lu Yi couldn't even understand how Spectre had managed to last until now. After seeing the situation clearly, Lu Yi immediately took out his star boat and prepared to leave this troublesome place. End of chapter. Chapter 1476. Lu Yi was more or less on guard against Ghost. He didn't think she would be so despicable as to ambush him here. In fact, Ghost didn't do that. However, Lu Yi didn't expect her to be the one being hunted. Seeing Lu Yi take out his star boat, Ghost panicked and transmitted her voice. Don't run. Fight him with me. Fight my ass. Lu Yi ignored her. The star boat slowly picked up speed and turned into a streak of light that shot into the distance. Ghost couldn't help but sigh. Since that's the case, don't blame me for what I do. Lu Yi suddenly had an ominous feeling. Sure enough, in the next moment, he heard Ghost shouting behind him, Fa Wuzuan, save me. Yu Yao, who was chasing Ghost, couldn't help but feel shocked when she heard the name Fa Wuzuan. The reason he was chasing Ghost was because she had killed a disciple he thought highly of. Although Ghost's cultivation base was inferior to his, her ability to escape was top-notch. He had been chasing her for several days, but he hadn't been able to catch her. However, Ghost was on the verge of collapsing. In half a day at most, she would be cornered. Yu Yao didn't pay much attention to the person who had appeared on Ghost's path of escape. While chasing Ghost, she had encountered some cultivators passing by. However, those cultivators had all avoided her, just like this person. However, when Ghost called out Fa Wuzuan's name, he couldn't help but pay attention. This person was an expert from a faction stationed on the Myriad Manifestations Sea. His faction was currently researching how to mass-produce twin chi connecting formation disks. Unfortunately, they hadn't made much progress. Since this thing came from Fa Wuzuan, he would definitely be able to mass-produce it. Every faction was very interested in a treasure that could change the situation of the cultivation world. Many people were looking for Fa Wuzuan. Unfortunately, after the chaotic battle, Fa Wuzuan seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. There was no trace of him. Yu Yao didn't expect to run into Fa Wuzuan here. When he looked carefully, he found that the figure was indeed very similar. He had never seen Fa Wuzuan before. However, during the auction, someone had secretly taken a photo of Fa Wuzuan's appearance, so he had seen him before. If this person was really Fa Wuzuan, he couldn't miss this chance. Seeing that Lu Ye's starboat was getting faster and faster, Yu Yao made a prompt decision. She raised her hand and shot out a beam of golden light. Standing on the deck of the starboat, Lu Yi summoned all of his spiritual power. Suddenly, he felt a strong sense of danger. Without any hesitation, he spun around and slashed out with his saber. Not only did this saber strike have the shadow of the tyrant saber art, but it also had the traces of the small saber inheritance. In addition to his current late-stage constellation realm cultivation, it could be said to be the strongest saber strike he had executed so far. The blade struck the golden light, but Lu Yi didn't feel the slightest bit of force. Just as he was thinking that things weren't looking good, the golden light had already circled around the mountain pan blade and was heading straight for his face. Lu Ye's body leaned to the side, and the golden light swept past his ear, causing a few strands of hair to flutter in the air. The golden light did not attack him again. Instead, it flew back in a circle. Lu Yi also pushed the star boat to the limit, and it turned into a streak of light that shot into the distance. In his field of vision, Yu Yao's figure was rapidly shrinking. He inwardly rejoiced that he had acted fast enough. Otherwise, if Yu Yao had caught up to him, it would have been troublesome. However, if that had really happened, he could have used the Void Spirit Mark to escape. Yu Yao might not have been able to do anything to him. Back when he was in the early stage of the Constellation Realm, hadn't he also used this move to evade Tang Jun's pursuit? When he turned around and saw that Yu Yao had no intention of pursuing him, Lu Yi couldn't help but frown slightly. He had a feeling that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Watching Lu Ye's departing figure, Yu Yao looked around but didn't see any trace of Spectre. However, he knew that Spectre was definitely hiding somewhere nearby. Spectre had done the same thing several times during their previous pursuit. It had taken him a lot of effort to find her. However, now wasn't the time to deal with this ghoul. In terms of value, Fa Wuzuan was much more valuable than this ghoul. Obediently go to Myriad World Island to receive your punishment within 10 days. Otherwise, I won't spare you even if you're that person's disciple. After speaking, Yu Yao lowered her head and looked at the item in her hand. It was half a rope. It was completely golden. It was the original body of the golden light that had attacked Lu Yi. He had thought that Lu Yi wouldn't be able to block his attack. However, he had underestimated Lu Ye's strength and reaction speed. His casual attack hadn't been able to do much to Lu Yi. Therefore, when he saw that he couldn't stop Lu Yi from escaping, he settled for the next best thing and took something from Lu Yi. At this moment, there were a few broken strands of hair wrapped around the rope. Yu Yao looked reluctant to part with it, but she still steeled her heart. She clenched her fist, and as her spiritual power surged, the rope suddenly released a golden light. Then, it began to burn as if it was on fire. This half of the golden rope was a treasure at the level of a magic treasure. Moreover, it was a rare treasure. After being burned, it was naturally destroyed. However, compared to Fa Wuzuan's value, what was a magic treasure? A moment later, Yu Yao opened her hand. The golden rope had disappeared, and in its place was a golden mark on her palm. He looked at it for a moment, then chased after it. Moments after he left, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared in the nearby starry sky. It was Spectre, who had been hiding here all this time. She looked in the direction Yu Yao had left in and knew that something was wrong. She hurriedly sent a message to Lu Yi. I don't know what kind of secret technique that person used. I'm afraid he can track your whereabouts. Be careful. She had no choice but to involve Fa Wuzuan in this dispute. After all, she had no way of escaping from the pursuit of a mid-stage Yu Yao. 2 days ago, Fa Wuzuan had sent her a message, so she took the opportunity to give him a rendezvous point. She had hoped to join forces with Fa Wuzuan to resist the enemy, but who would have thought that it wouldn't work out? However, if Fa Wuzuan was really captured or killed because of this, she would feel guilty. No matter what, Fa Wuzuan had been a great help in the battle against the dried skeleton general. She was naturally willing to give Fa Wuzuan a kind warning. However, she was still a little worried, so she silently followed the mid-stage Yu Yao from afar. Almost as soon as the golden rope burned, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. It was as if something was secretly watching him. No matter how fast he drove the star boat, he couldn't shake it off. Originally, he wasn't sure what was going on, but after seeing Spectre's message, Lu Yi realized that Yu Yao hadn't given up on him. Instead, she had used some kind of secret technique to track his whereabouts. I'll deal with you later, Lu Yi replied viciously. Originally, he had planned to return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea directly, but now he couldn't. If Yu Yao really had the ability to track his whereabouts, Peerless Island couldn't be exposed. Hiding on the 10,000 Elephant Island was one way. No one could attack him there, but he couldn't hide on the 10,000 Elephant Island forever. Moreover, he couldn't determine how long this secret technique would last. Spectre could feel the anger in Lu Ye's heart, so she could only reply, "I didn't have a choice. I originally wanted to join forces with you, but who knew you would run away so quickly? I was wrong. If you survive, I'll make it up to you later." He didn't need to think about making it up to her for the time being. What he needed to think about now was how to solve his current predicament. Just as he was thinking, the feeling of being watched suddenly intensified. Lu Yi turned around and saw a dot of light rapidly approaching him from the distance. It was much faster than he was. Surprisingly, Yu Yao was also chasing after him on her star boat. Although they were both using star boats, Yu Yao's cultivation was higher, and her star boat was better than his. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before she caught up to him. Lu Yi could only raise his hand and send out a flying artifact. At the same time, he drove the star boat with all his might to stall for time. Less than an hour later, the distance between them had almost reached a critical point. Sensing the surge of Yu Yao's spiritual energy behind him, Lu Yi realized that she was about to make a move. He didn't even bother with the star boat. He directly activated the Void Spirit mark and left. Yu Yao, who was about to make a move, frowned. Even she couldn't see how Lu Yi had disappeared. She quickly lowered her head and looked at her palm. To her surprise, she discovered that the golden mark was pointing in another direction. Based on her senses, she could sense that Fa Wuzuan was already thousands of kilometers away. How did he do it? She couldn't possibly say that Fa Wuzuan's star boat had a teleportation formation that connected it to another place, right? The secret technique's guidance couldn't be wrong. She quickly changed direction and flew in the direction the mark was pointing. In that direction, Lu Yi had already sent out a few flying artifacts in advance. He was also fleeing with all his might. However, not long after, he sensed that Yu Yao was already chasing after him. He had no choice but to activate the Void Spirit mark again and change his position. After several times of fleeing, Lu Yi discovered that no matter what he did, he couldn't shake off Yu Yao's pursuit. It seemed that unless he killed Yu Yao this time, he wouldn't be able to shake her off. As this thought flashed through his mind, Lu Yi made his decision. He set his sights on a desolate star and flew toward it. He hurriedly broke into the desolate star. As soon as he arrived, he heard a shout from behind him, "You can't escape. Surrender obediently and I won't make things difficult for you. But if I capture you, you'll have to suffer a little." Lu Yi naturally ignored him. Seeing that he didn't have much time left, he couldn't afford to be picky. He directly took out the Azure Sea Conch, poured his spiritual energy into it, and blew it. At the same time, he stared in the direction Yu Yao was coming from with a seemingly panicked expression. The sound of the conch reverberated, and a blue light flashed. Yu Yao had already flown into the desolate star. She saw Lu Ye's actions from afar. Although she didn't know what he was going to do, she still pressed her palm down from afar. A huge palm print appeared out of thin air. It descended as if the sky had collapsed, instantly engulfing Lu Ye's figure. Dust flew everywhere. The scene was chaotic. End of chapter. Chapter 1477. On the desolate star, Yu Yao, who had chased after Lu Xian, looked down coldly. Her expression suddenly changed because she sensed that Fa Wuzuan's aura had disappeared without a trace. She hurriedly waved her sleeves and the dust in the air dissipated, revealing the scene below. Sure enough, Fa Wuzuan was nowhere to be seen. There was only something that looked like a door standing there. Did Fa Wuzuan use some method to create this door? What kind of magical method was this? Did Fa Wuzuan's repeated teleportations have something to do with this door? Where did this door lead to? Many thoughts flashed through his mind and he quickly looked at his palm. He frowned when he saw what was on his palm. This was because the golden imprint on his palm was rapidly dimming, and it looked like it was about to disappear. The secret technique he used with the help of the broken golden rope was extremely powerful. As long as they were in the same space and weren't too far apart, he could use the mark to investigate. Now that the mark was rapidly disappearing, it could only mean one thing. Fa Wuzuan had either entered another space or was very far away from him. so far away that the secret technique would lose its effect. He faintly felt that it was the former because the door didn't look very stable. It couldn't lead too far away. In other words, Fa Wuzuan must have used this door to hide in another space. Lu Yi, of course, wasn't in another space. The door formed by the Azure Sea Snail allowed him to enter the Mermaid Clan's territory. Strictly speaking, they were still in the same space. However, because of the 10,000 Elephant Sea's water, the space under the sea and outside the sea were two different worlds. This caused the secret technique to lose its effect. The man couldn't help but hesitate. In the current situation, he only had two choices. He could chase after Fa Wuzuan through the door or wait here. Chasing after Fa Wuzuan was risky. No one knew what was going on the other side of the door. Waiting here was even more unreliable because no one could be sure if Fa Wuzuan would come out again. Perhaps he would leave from another place. After a moment of hesitation, the man made his decision. His body flashed and he rushed into the door. Fa Wuzuan was just a constellation, and he was Yu Yao. If Fa Wuzuan could go, he could go. Even if Fa Wuzuan ambushed him, he was confident he could resolve it. Meeting Fa Wuzuan this time was a coincidence. If he missed this chance, it would not be easy to find Fa Wuzuan again. As long as he could take him down, he would be able to mass-produce the twin chi connecting branch array disk. The benefits it would bring to the faction behind Fa Wuzuan would be unimaginable. On the other side, Lu Yi appeared in front of the heavenly spiral hall in a sorry state. The two mere people who had been guarding here under Bai Lu's orders immediately came forward to greet him. Unexpectedly, before they could even get close, Lu Yi madly urged his spiritual power, causing a rumbling sound. The two mermaids were stunned. They didn't know what Lu Yi was doing, but Lu Yi had already rushed in front of them. She grabbed one of them with each hand and threw them far away. Then, she turned around and stared at the door from which she had come. He had been forced to use the Azure Sea Snail to come here because he was betting that Yu Yao wouldn't give up on him so easily. If Yu Yao was confident in her strength and came here to kill him, then that would naturally be good for him. However, if she was a cautious person and didn't come after him, then Lu Ye's plan would be ruined. The door couldn't be maintained for long. Once it disappeared, he would have to swim out of this place if he wanted to leave. His previous experience had taught Lu Yi that with his current cultivation, it was very unreliable for him to swim out of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. He might even encounter Yu Yao or a radiant star beast along the way and become food for them. Therefore, Lu Yi could only hope that Yu Yao would come after him. The short wait seemed to stretch on endlessly. Fortunately, not long after, the door suddenly began to vibrate. Lu Ye's heart settled. He knew that this was a sign that someone was passing through the door. Yu Yao really did come after him. He dashed out and arrived at the back of the door. Just as he stood there, he saw Yu Yao, who had been chasing after him, reveal herself. She was a cautious person. She had rashly entered an unknown place, so she had already activated a protective barrier around her body. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of magic artifact this was, but a silver belt coiled around her body like a silver dragon. Lu Yi took advantage of the fact that this person had just appeared and frantically poured his spiritual energy into the mountain plate saber. His flesh and blood vibrated rhythmically. At this moment, there was nothing else in his eyes but Yu Yao, who was chasing after him. Saber lights flashed in an endless stream. The faint sound of crashing waves could be heard. Yu Yao abruptly turned her head to look. In her field of vision, boundless saber lights attacked her. However, she could sense that the saber lights were not just saber lights but more like waves. The person snorted coldly. There is a fundamental difference between a constellation and Yu Yao. How dare you act so impudently? He raised a hand and pushed lightly. The saber lights shattered. Then, he turned his palm into a claw and grabbed at Lu Yi. He thought that he would be able to catch Lu Yi head-on. Who knew that after the shattered saber lights, there would be even more saber lights? The person's eyes were filled with surprise. It was too late to retreat now. Moreover, he didn't feel the need to retreat when he was up against a constellation. He channeled his spiritual energy and continued to reach forward. The sound of crashing waves grew more ferocious. It was as if a tsunami was covering the sky. The the saber lights turned into waves, layer upon layer, endless. 10-layered waves. 100-layered waves. 1,000-layered waves. 10,000-layered waves. Recently, Lu Yi had been comprehending the saber techniques in the dagger legacy. Although he had gained some insights, he still felt that he was missing something. It was only now that he was facing Yu Yao that he finally realized that the elegance of the saber techniques in the legacy was just a facade. The true essence was its endless momentum. There was indeed a fundamental difference between a constellation's strength and Yu Yao's. It was like the difference between a handful of gravel and a solid rock. Once they collided, the constellation's strength would be easily defeated. However, if one layer of strength could not withstand it, what about 10 layers? What about 100 layers, 1,000 layers, or even 10,000 layers? The saber techniques in the dagger legacy might not be that profound or complicated, but this saber technique seemed to be specially designed for the weak to defeat the strong. It was especially suitable for a battle between a constellation and Yu Yao. It was exactly what Lu Yi needed to face now. As Yu Yao's hand reached out, the layers of saber lights shattered continuously. It seemed to have no effect, but Lu Yi could sense that the might of his opponent's hand was continuously weakening as the saber lights shattered. In other words, the 10,000-layered waves had indeed weakened the power of his attack. Even the defensive power on his opponent's arm had dimmed somewhat. If his opponent had not activated the power of his defensive Dharma treasure in advance, he would have definitely suffered a small loss. However, the difference in their strength was not small. In a short moment, Lu Ye's endless saber lights were broken. His opponent's hand pressed against Lu Ye's chest, and his transcendence energy burst forth. Even though Lu Yi activated the Holy Guardian Spirit rune when he saw that the situation was bad, it shattered. Lu Ye's chest caved in, and he felt his heart stop beating for a moment. He was sent flying and crashed heavily into the wall of the heavenly conch hall behind him. There was a sweet taste in his throat, and the taste of blood filled his mouth. He was secretly shocked. Yu Yao was indeed Yu Yao. Moreover, she was at the mid-stage. Her strength was not something he could fight against at the moment. He was shocked, but Yu Yao, who was chasing after him, was even more shocked. This was because he had never seen a constellation that could withstand one of his attacks. With this strength, it would have been no problem for him to take first place when the constellation hall opened. But for some reason, Fa Wuzuan disappeared after the chaotic battle. Suddenly, there was a strange commotion, followed by a cold shout. "Who dares to be impudent in my heavenly conch palace?" Lu Yi was overjoyed when he heard this voice. When he first appeared, he madly circulated his spiritual energy and caused a commotion, all for the sake of alerting the experts of the mermaid race. Now, it seemed that his plan had succeeded. Great Elder Yen Miao had arrived. Moreover, he could sense powerful auras belonging to Yu Yao rushing over from all directions. Although the mermaid race did not have any Sunshine Realm experts, they still had a few Yu Yao. At the very least, Lu Yi knew that the 5 great elders were all from the Yu Yao realm. As for whether there were other Yu Yao, Lu Yi did not know, but there should be some. How could a mid-stage Yu Yao come to the mermaid race's heavenly conch palace and behave so atrociously? When Great Elder shouted, he used the mermaid race's language. Lu Yi could resonate with him, but the Yu Yao cultivator could not. Naturally, he could not understand what Yen Miao was shouting. But he was not stupid. When he sensed the auras of the Yu Yao, he immediately knew that something was wrong. He finally understood why Fa Wuzuan had come here. It turned out that there was someone protecting him. It was no longer realistic to want to capture Fa Wuzuan. The Yu Yao cultivator made a prompt decision to return through the door. At the same time, Lu Yi, who had slid down from the wall of the heavenly conch palace, was madly rushing over. The door had not disappeared yet. If the enemy retreated, it would be difficult to kill him again. If the enemy did not die, he would be able to track his whereabouts with that secret technique. Lu Yi would not be able to live in peace in the future. What he did not know was that when he entered this place with the help of the heavenly conch, the enemy's secret technique had already lost its effect. Lu Yi only had one thought now. No matter what, he had to stop the enemy from leaving. But the enemy was right beside the door. It would take time for him to rush over. How could he make it in time? Moreover, even if he did rush over, the difference in strength between them was obvious. Lu Yi might not be able to stop him. Just as the enemy was about to leave, the green door shook again. Lu Yi was stunned. He immediately realized that someone else was coming. He did not know who it was. Perhaps someone was passing by and saw the door he had left on the desolate planet. Out of curiosity, they came in to take a look. But in the next moment, he knew he was wrong. The person who had come in through the door was not just anyone, but Ghost. When she appeared, she looked like she was sneaking around. She even hid herself immediately. Lu Yi almost laughed out loud. Good would be rewarded with good, and evil with evil. The heavenly Tao was a cycle of reincarnation. Who would the heavens spare? He had suffered such an unexpected calamity because of Ghost. This woman was clearly being hunted down, but she still asked him to meet up. She even wanted to divert the trouble away. But now, she had barged into a tiger's den. End of chapter. Chapter 1478. Spectre felt that she had been extremely unlucky recently. She had killed a random guy, but it turned out that he had a mid-stage Yu Yao backing him. In the end, she had been chased to the point where she had nowhere to run. She had finally managed to lure Yu Yao away with great difficulty, and now she had a chance to catch her breath. After Yu Yao had chased after Fa Wuzuan, she had felt somewhat uneasy. She had followed them from afar, hoping to see if Fa Wuzuan could shake them off. In the end, they were all flying on their planetary ships. She couldn't make too much of a commotion, so she was soon left behind. Helpless, she could only find a desolate star to hide in and heal her injuries. Before his injuries were fully healed, he heard someone shouting something like, "You can't escape. Surrender obediently and I won't make things difficult for you. But if I capture you, you'll have to suffer a little." When Spectre heard that, she realized that it was Yu Yao's voice. She immediately understood that Fa Wuzuan had also hidden on this desolate star and lured Yu Yao here. She even suspected that Fa Wuzuan knew she was here and deliberately lured Yu Yao here. However, she quickly realized that it was just a coincidence. When she sneaked out of her hiding place and looked around, she found the door Lu Yi had left behind. She was curious and didn't know where the door led. She also didn't see Fa Wuzuan or Yu Yao around. Even though she knew that it wasn't easy to barge into an unknown door like this as a woman, she couldn't hold back her curiosity. After a great struggle in her mind, she stepped into the door. She was very experienced in this kind of thing. As soon as she stepped into the door and steadied herself, she immediately activated her concealment and aura concealment ghostly tattoo. Then she saw a familiar face. Who else could it be but Yu Yao, who had been chasing her all this time? She didn't know what Yu Yao had encountered, but she looked a little flustered. When she saw Spectre, she was clearly startled. Then she wantonly raised her hand and slapped down. Spectre didn't have time to retreat. She cried out in alarm, and under the veil covering her face, she opened her mouth and shot out a beam of blood-red light, hitting the other party's palm. Spectre didn't know what method she used, but Yu Yao's attack didn't work. With a loud bang, Yu Yao staggered a few steps back. On the other hand, Spectre's aura was weak and her hair was disheveled. It seemed that the attack just now had damaged her vitality greatly. It made sense. A late-stage Xingqiu had used a technique that could repel Yu Yao. Even if Yu Yao wasn't prepared, she must have paid a price. This was her strongest life-saving technique. After the attack, Ghost felt dizzy and instinctively retreated, wanting to leave this troublesome place. Then, just as she moved, she felt her arm tighten. She looked over in a daze and saw Fa Wuzuan appear in front of her and grab her arm. Ghost opened her mouth, and then her expression changed drastically. How could Lu Yi pay any attention to her? Since she's already here, she can forget about leaving. Xiao Chen stretched out his hand and flung Yu Ling away. He did not care whether Yu Ling was dead or alive. He pushed his saber again, and saber lights shot towards Yu Yao. Yu Yao had only just regained her footing when the saber light enveloped her. Although she quickly dissolved it, it was too late for her to escape through the door. Several figures arrived one after another. They were the Yu Yao elders of the Merfolk clan. As they appeared, ethereal singing could be heard. Yu Yao was shocked. She didn't expect there to be merfolk here. Moreover, it looked like there was a group of them. Lu Yi had already retreated. Bai Lu came to his side and asked with concern, "Li Tai Bai, are you all right? What happened?" Lu Yi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and shook his head. "I'm fine. I was hunted down and had no choice but to escape here. I'll come back and apologize to the great elder and the others. I've caused you trouble this time." Bai Lu shook her head. "It's no trouble. As long as you're fine." Lu Yi glanced at the crumbling door. "It's too late. I'll leave first. I'll come back in a few days." Just as he moved, someone grabbed his ankle. He looked down and saw that Yu Yu, who was so weak that she looked like she only had one breath left, had appeared at his feet. She pouted and hugged his ankle with both hands. She looked up at him pitifully. "Take me with you." Lu Yi and Bai Lu were communicating through telepathy. Yu Yu couldn't hear them, but her eyes were sharp. She could see that Lu Yi wanted to leave. She didn't know where this place was, but there was a group of merfolk living here. They didn't look weak either. Fa Wuzuan was obviously on good terms with this group of merfolk. If she wanted to leave, she could only ask Fa Wuzuan to take her with him. Lu Yi pointed at Yu Yu on the ground and said to Bai Lu, "Keep an eye on this person. She's a ghost cultivator. Don't let her recover too quickly." "Is she an enemy?" Bai Lu asked. Lu Yi didn't know how to identify Yu Yu. He thought for a moment and said, "Not really, but she's not a friend either." He pulled his foot out of Yu Yu's grasp and glanced at the battlefield. His heart settled and he quickly rushed toward the door. Yu Yu's plaintive voice came from behind him. "Fa Daddy, take me with you. I'm so scared here alone. What's the use of calling me Daddy now?" Lu Yi didn't even look back as he entered the door. When he disappeared, the door also disappeared. In front of the Celestial Spiral Palace, several Yu Yao of the Merfolk clan were engaged in a fierce battle with the enemy. With the assistance of the mysterious song, they easily gained control of the situation. The Merfolk clan showed no mercy and killed Yu Yao on the spot. Although the first elder and the others were courteous to Lu Yi, they didn't have a good impression of the entire human race. Their clan had fallen into their current predicament because of a powerful human. On the desolate star, Lu Yi reappeared. He wasn't in a hurry to return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The Azure Sea conch had a cooldown time, and it would take a few more days. He found a secluded place nearby and set up a formation to treat his injuries first. A day later, he finally set off for the 10,000 Elephant Sea. He originally wanted to make a deal with Yu Yu and see if he could see the aura concealing ghostly tattoo on her body. If that didn't work, he could ask Yu Yu to engrave it. At most, he would just have to pay some spirit jades. Who would have thought that he would be dragged into such trouble? Although the trouble had been resolved, he still had to finish what he started. He had lost his planetary boat. When he was being chased, he didn't have time to take care of it. Fortunately, Lu Yi was quite rich now. He didn't care if he lost a planetary boat of poor quality. He could always buy a better one later. He returned to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. When he was still some distance away from the Peerless Island, he found an opportunity and dove into the 10,000 Elephant Sea. He swam all the way to the Peerless Island and arrived at the place where he had set up the Minor Constellation Palace. The Minor Constellation Hall continued to reverse the seawater, turning it into pure starry sky energy. Bubbles of various sizes continued to rise. Lu Yi thought about it for a moment, then raised his hand and placed it on the Minor Constellation Hall, increasing its reverse seawater efficiency by a notch. Since he wanted to observe whether the construction of the spiritual island was going smoothly, increasing the efficiency would save him some time. Immediately after, he activated the power of the Minor Constellation Palace and opened the door to the main hall of the Minor Constellation Palace. The Azure Sea conch's door could not be maintained for long. The further the distance, the shorter the time it could be maintained. However, Lu Yi did not know how long the door of the Minor Constellation Palace could be maintained. He wanted to give it a try. If this door could be maintained, he would no longer have to worry about being trapped under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Just like just now, he didn't have to rush back at all. Even if the Azure Sea conch's door disappeared, He could still return to the Peerless Island through the minor constellation palace. Maintaining the door required energy. However, the 10,000 elephant sea's water was limitless. As long as the minor constellation palace could maintain the reversing seawater, the energy required to maintain the door was negligible. After he was done, Lu Yi swam out and returned to the Peerless Island from where he had entered the sea. After a few days, the starry sky energy on the island had undoubtedly become denser. It seemed like the idea of using the minor constellation palace to construct the spiritual island could be implemented. Moreover, the changes here had undoubtedly attracted the attention of some cultivators passing by. This was because Lu Yi noticed that someone was secretly observing from afar. He secretly rejoiced that he had invited Tang Jun over to take charge. Otherwise, without Yu Yao, it would be easy for others to target this spiritual island that had been revived. With Tang Jun around, he would be able to reduce a lot of unnecessary trouble. The facilities on the island were more or less completed. To the constellation cultivators, this was not a difficult task. The constellation cultivators who had been recruited earlier were undoubtedly more expectant than when they first came here. When they had first arrived, the Peerless Island was just a deserted island. However, the island was now reviving. The energy on the island was getting denser by the day. This was great news for them. This was because they could save a lot of spirit jades if they cultivated on such a spiritual island. Generally speaking, it was very difficult for early constellation stage cultivators like them, who had no background, to establish themselves on a spiritual island. None of the spiritual islands would recruit people like them. There were already too many cultivators in their own star system, so who would recruit outsiders? Tang Jun was still presiding over the construction of the Great Array. However, he had encountered a problem. Therefore, not long after Lu Yi returned to the Peerless Island, Chu Shun came looking for him. He sat in front of Lu Yi with a look of embarrassment and stammered for a while. Lu Yi glanced at him and roughly knew what he was here for. He directly asked, "Are you lacking spirit jades?" Chu Shun blushed and took the opportunity to flatter him. "My parents gave birth to me. Senior brother knows me best." The spirit jades he had were the 500,000 that Lu Yi had given him after the auction. However, he had spent them all recently. To set up a great array that could envelop the entire spiritual island and protect it well, it was not something that could be done with a few 100,000 spirit jades. Chu Xin had no other choice but to look for Lu Yi. This was because he knew that Boss Fa was very rich. End of chapter. Chapter 1479. Inside the cave, Lu Yi took out a storage ring and handed it to Chu Shun. Chu Shun received it solemnly and scanned it with his divine sense. He was overjoyed. "Senior brother, isn't this a little too much?" He originally thought that borrowing a few 100,000 spirit jades from old Fa would be enough, but who knew that old Fa would casually throw 5 million spirit jades over? It was 10 times more than what he had expected. Lu Yi said indifferently, "Since you want to set up a formation, then set up the best one. Don't be too calculative about the early costs." Now that Lu Yi could freely travel between the Vientiane Sea and the merfolk's territory, it could be said that he had completely opened up a path of wealth that belonged solely to him. Although he had not received any benefits from the merfolk yet, if he needed spirit jades in the future, he only needed to ask and the merfolk would not be stingy. Moreover, with the abundant resources under the sea, as long as he could find a way, those star beasts and seaweed could all be turned into spirit jades. 5 million spirit jades was really nothing to him. "Then I'll write a contract with senior brother. Just treat it as a loan and I'll return it to you with interest," Chu Shun said. Lu Yi shook his head. "No need, just treat it as my investment." Chu Shun did not refuse and said happily, "That's fine too." There was no need to be polite with old Fa. Although he was the master of this peerless island on the surface, it was actually old Fa who first occupied this place. Without old Fa's permission he would not have stayed, so old Fa should have a share of Peerless Island. "Oh right, senior brother, there's something else I want to discuss with you." "What is it?" Chu Shun said, "In the past few days, someone has contacted me on behalf of a certain faction. They want to bring our Peerless Island under their jurisdiction. If we agree, they can provide us with some resources and manpower. What do you think, senior brother? Lu Yi said, "You're the island master of Peerless Island. You can make these decisions yourself, no need to ask me." Chu Shen nodded, "Then I know what to do." A moment later, Chu Shen left. Although he did not say what he would do, Lu Yi knew that Chu Shen would never agree to those factions' requests just from the fact that he came to borrow spirit jades. In any case, he was from the coachman world. Even if he really wanted to cooperate with a force, he would only choose a local force in the Wanxiang galaxy. Why would he collude with other forces? Moreover, he was a fledgling who wanted to achieve great things. If he really agreed to cooperate with other forces, he would definitely be restricted and controlled by others in the future. His personality was the kind of person who would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. How could he allow such a thing to happen? While the construction of Matchless Island continued, the embryonic form of the Grand Protective Array had already been completed. With the protection of the Grand Protective Array, the amount of starry sky energy produced by the minor constellation palace's reverse seawater would be reduced. This also caused the density of starry sky energy on Matchless Island to increase even faster than before. This change was clearly felt by every cultivator on the Peerless Island, causing them to feel excited. Lu Yi was waiting for the time when the Azure Sea Snail could be used. Although he could enter the Constellation Hall's main hall through the entrance of the Minor Constellation Hall, he still needed to rush to the Mermaid Clan's territory from the main hall. In a place like the sea, without a seahorse as a mount, it would be very slow to swim. Therefore, it was best to use the Azure Sea Snail to directly reach the Heavenly Snail Hall. After a few more days, it was finally time to use the Azure Sea Snail. Lu Yi didn't immediately urge the Azure Sea Snail's power. Instead, he first dived into the sea to check if the entrance to the Minor Constellation Hall was still open. After confirming that there were no problems with the entrance and that there were no signs of it closing, Lu Yi quietly returned to the cave and, under the cover of many restrictions and spirit arrays, blew the Azure Sea Snail. The entrance opened and he stepped inside. Returning to the Minor Constellation Hall, Lu Yi immediately noticed that many gazes were fixed on him, one of which was particularly sharp. But soon, these gazes softened. Lu Yi looked around and found that there were many mermaids here, both in the open and in the dark. In the direction of the source of the sharp gaze, there was a very majestic male mermaid. Judging from the other party's aura, he was from the Moon Jade realm. Obviously, after the previous incident, the Mermaid Clan had made arrangements here to prevent Lu Yi from attracting any masters here and catching them off guard. "Li Tai Bai," a familiar voice called out. Lu Yi turned to look and saw Bai Lu walking towards him. She had undoubtedly been waiting here on purpose because Lu Yi had told her that he would come back in a few days. She knew the characteristics of the Azure Sea Snail. "How is it?" Lu Yi asked. Last time, he hadn't waited for the battle to end before leaving, so he didn't know what had happened in the end. However, before he left, he had seen that Moon Jade realm midstage being suppressed by the Mermaid Clan's elders, so it was very likely that the enemy had already been defeated. "That Moon Jade is already dead," Bai Lu explained. As she explained, she handed over several storage rings. "These are all his belongings. The elders told me to give them to you." Lu Yi said, "These are all your spoils of war, so there's no need to give them to me. I also have to thank you for doing me a great favor." Bai Lu grabbed his hand and placed the storage rings in his palm. These storage rings all have restrictions. The elders aren't proficient in breaking them, so they don't dare to act rashly. It's better to leave them to you. Lu Yi thought about it and nodded. "Then I'll give them to you after I break the restrictions." Bai Lu continued. "Also, the elders said that if you encounter any troublesome fellows in the future that you can't deal with, just lure them here, and we'll help you deal with them. Also, you're not allowed to thank us, and you don't have to be polite. You've helped us a lot, so we naturally have to help you." What else could Lu Yi say? He could only nod. However, this time, he was lucky. He had lured that Moon Jade realm midstage cultivator here. If it had been someone else who was more cautious, they might not have been able to do so. Moreover, the door was right there. After they came in and sensed that something was wrong, they would definitely leave immediately. Therefore, it was best not to do this a second time. There were too many uncontrollable factors. What about that ghost cultivator? Lu Yi asked. Although he had warned Bai Lu before he left, if the mermaid clan killed Ghost Cultivator along with the Ghost Cultivator, then Ghost Cultivator's death would be too unjust. Come with me, Bai Lu said and led Lu Yi in a certain direction. Along the way, Lu Yi activated the Thousand Faces spirit pattern and changed his appearance into Fa Wuzuan's appearance. Bai Lu clicked her tongue in wonder. The last time Lu Yi came here, he also had Fa Wuzuan's appearance. Although his appearance was different, his temperament and figure could not be changed. Moreover, only Lu Yi could enter this place through the Azure Sea Snail, so Bai Lu still recognized him at a glance. You don't want her to know your true appearance? Bai Lu asked. Lu Yi nodded. She has seen my true appearance, so I have to use a different appearance to meet her. Bai Lu understood. Ghost Cultivator was currently locked up in a prison-like place in the Azure Sea Snail Palace. This place was originally used to imprison mermaids who had made mistakes, so it did not have much defensive power. However, when Lu Yi saw Ghost Cultivator, he found that she was lying limp on the ground like a pile of mud, not moving at all. Her aura was very weak, as if she had lost all her spiritual power. A few days ago, she used some unknown method to repel Yu Yao's attack head-on. Even if the other party did not use her full strength at that time, it was not easy to do so with the strength of a constellation. For this reason, Ghost Cultivator paid a huge price and became dispirited at that time. Looking at it today, the situation seemed to be even more serious than before. However, one thing was certain, Ghost Cultivator was not dead. The main reason was that the mermaids did not know how to deal with Ghost Cultivator. Lu Yi told Bai Lu that this fellow was neither an enemy nor a friend, so the mermaids could only leave her be for the time being. Is she seriously injured? Lu Yi asked. Bai Lu said, I've examined her. There are no serious injuries, but it seems that because she used a power that did not belong to her, her chi is weak and her body is weak. Fourth Elder also placed a restriction on her body, so she can't recover or use her spiritual power. Lu Yi understood and stared at Ghost Cultivator who was lying motionless on the ground as if she had fallen asleep. His eyes flashed. Open the door, Lu Yi said. Bai Lu turned her head and motioned to the male mermaid who was in charge of guarding this place. He immediately stepped forward and undid the restriction, opening the door to the prison. However, Li did not go in. When Bai Lu was about to enter, he even pulled her aside and moved her to the side. Just as Bai Lu was puzzled, a sudden change occurred. Ghost Cultivator, whose aura was clearly weak and whose spiritual power had been depleted, suddenly jumped up as if she had been injected with chicken blood. She rushed out of the prison like a bolt of lightning and disappeared in the next instant. Only a smug voice could be heard from all directions. You want to trap this old lady here? Try again in your next life. He Wuzun, I will settle this debt with you sooner or later. Bai Lu was shocked. She never imagined that the restriction Fourth Elder placed on Ghost Cultivator would lose its effect. Moreover, Ghost Cultivator had recovered her strength at some unknown time. She wanted to chase after her, but Lu Yi pulled her back. She turned to look at Lu Yi in confusion. Lu Yi shook his head, then said softly in the direction Ghost Cultivator left, I'll wait for you here. Come back when you understand. If this was any other place, Ghost Cultivator might have escaped. This fellow's other abilities aside, her concealment and escape methods were first-rate. A mermaid territory might not be able to trap her. However, this was the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Where else could she go besides the Emperor Snail Palace? Deep into the 10,000 Elephant Sea? That would be seeking death. If Ghost Cultivator wanted to escape now, Lu Yi had to agree. You knew she was faking it? Bai Lu asked. Otherwise, why would Li Taibai pull her aside when the prison door was opened? It was obvious that he was making way for Ghost Cultivator. Lu Yi shook his head. I didn't see that. However, people like her are extremely cunning. Even if she was placed under a restriction, she shouldn't be so weak. There's no harm in thinking more when dealing with her. Bai Lu seemed to understand. You humans are so complicated. She's not a human. She's a ghost. End of chapter. Chapter 1480. As for how to deal with Gui Ling, Lu Yi had a headache. If she really was an enemy, then he could just kill her. There was no need to show any mercy, but Gui Ling wasn't an enemy. It was true that he had encountered some trouble because of her. If he hadn't lured the enemy to the merfolk's territory, Lu Yi wouldn't have known how to deal with it. He had to settle this with her. He couldn't let her go. While waiting, Lu Yi began to break the restrictions on the storage rings. As expected of the Moon Jade Realm's storage rings, the restrictions weren't complicated, but they weren't easy to break. Lu Yi spent a lot of effort and even destroyed one storage ring before he could break the rest. As mentioned before, he gave the storage rings to Bai Lu. These were the merfolk's spoils of war. No matter how good the treasures inside were, he had no reason to keep them. Since he had nothing to do, he chatted with Bai Lu. Bai Lu loved to listen to him talk about the outside world. When Lu Yi was at the Constellation Hall, Bai Lu would pester him to talk about these things every time she went there. She always listened with great interest. Unfortunately, their clan was cursed and couldn't leave the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Otherwise, they could go out and take a look. Time passed. After more than half a day, Lu Yi, who was arguing with Bai Lu about the Constellation Hall, suddenly stopped talking and turned to look at the door. "You don't want to come in? Do you want me to invite you in?" Bai Lu was startled. When she turned to look, she didn't see anything. Just as she was about to speak, the space at the door distorted, and a familiar figure appeared. Who else could it be but the ghost clan member called Gui Ling? Bai Lu was slightly frightened. With this level of concealment, no one in the Merfolk clan would be able to detect her. She didn't know how Li Taibai had detected her. If it was before, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to detect her. However, after deriving a new concealment technique, Lu Yi's attainments in concealment were much stronger than before. Moreover, part of his new concealment technique came from Gui Ling's ghostly patterns, so they could be considered to be of the same origin. In addition, Gui Ling's current condition wasn't good, so it wasn't difficult for him to detect her. The ghost no longer looked like she had just been injected with chicken blood. Her face was obviously very pale, and her eyes were somewhat listless. That attack just now was obviously a burst of power that she had accumulated for a long time. As long as she escaped from this place, she could find a place to recuperate. Who would have thought that she would wander around the Huang Snail Palace for half a day without being able to leave? It was not that there was no way out. There were several passages leading to the 10,000 Elephant Sea in the Royal Snail Palace, but Ghost retreated after a brief attempt. Revealing herself, she clutched her chest with one hand and staggered into the cell. Then, she sat down not far from Lu Yi and gasped for breath as if she was about to die. She coughed up blood before she could speak, and blood stained her veil. Bai Lu looked on worriedly, afraid that she would really die just like that. Lu Yi, however, remained indifferent, because he didn't know if it was true or not. Spectre's miserable appearance might just be a means to gain sympathy. After a long while, Spectre calmed down and asked, "Le Wuzuan, tell me honestly, where is this place?" There was a group of mermaids here, and other than this strange space, the surroundings were filled with seawater similar to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Spectre really couldn't figure out where this place was. She had taken out the star chart to try to locate it, but the star chart was completely useless here. "Where is this place? You can make your own judgment. Why ask me?" Lu Yi replied indifferently. Spectre's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. She stared at Lu Yi for a long time before slowly shaking his head. Impossible, absolutely impossible. She did have a guess, but how could this kind of thing be true? If you say it's impossible, then it's impossible. Lu Yi had no intention of explaining for her. But since you're here, then stay here and don't think about nonsense. Don't try to hurt any of the mermaids. Otherwise, you'll only make your situation worse. Spectre said angrily, "Fuwuzuan, do you still have a conscience?" Lu Yi looked at her casually. "You used my name to divert the trouble, causing me to be hunted down by Yu Yao, and you're talking to me about conscience? Do you have any conscience at all? Believe it or not, I didn't want to divert the trouble away. I was really out of ideas at that time. You just happened to contact me, and I thought that we might be able to fight him together. Who knew that you would run away by yourself? If he wanted to chase you, I couldn't stop him. Besides, if I really wanted to divert the trouble away, I could have totally ignored you. But in fact, I've been chasing you all the time because I was afraid that something would happen to you. At that time, I could have helped you. Otherwise, do you think I would have come to this godforsaken place? I was worried about you. Do you believe that yourself? Lu Yi looked at her coldly. Ghost touched her chest and said, I can swear on my conscience. Lu Yi stared at her for a while. He didn't see any falsehood in her eyes. He really couldn't tell whether she was telling the truth or not. Normally, after Lu Yi had diverted Yu Yao away, Spectre could have escaped without a trace. There was no need for her to chase him all the way here. But she still came. It seemed like what she said was true. Lu Yi didn't want to dwell on this any longer. He said, anyway, since you're here, don't leave. This will be your home from now on. You can stay here with peace of mind. Spectre was on the verge of tears. She shifted her body and grabbed Lu Ye's arm with both hands. She shook it gently. Senior Brother Fa, you can't do this to me. I know you can leave this place. It's that kind of door. Open the door and take me out. I'll remember your kindness for the rest of my life. Bai Lu looked at her coquettishly from the side. Her eyes were about to spit fire. Spectre was still shaking Lu Ye's arm. She vowed solemnly, also, don't worry. I, Spectre, won't tell anyone about this place, including the door. I'm a woman who keeps her mouth shut. Lu Yi didn't respond. He just looked at her with a half-smile. Spectre scowled miserably. Then what do you want me to do? You can't really lock me up here for the rest of my life. We don't have any deep grudges. Draw me a Dao, and I'll agree to anything. I don't have a Dao to draw. Lu Yi pulled his arm out, stood up, and looked down at her condescendingly. You're not in a good state, you should recover first. Saying this, he threw a few bottles of healing pills to her, then led Bai Lu out. Spectre wanted to chase after him, but she had no strength left. She lay on the ground and looked at Lu Ye's back. She opened her arms and shouted, Fuwuzuan, you can't do this to me. There was no response. After they left the prison, Bai Lu said angrily, I'm going to ask the Grand Elder to place more restrictions on her. Let's see how she dispels them this time. Lu Yi stopped her. There's no need. Let her recover first. Spectre looked very pitiful. Lu Yi could see that she was indeed at the end of her rope. If she didn't recover soon, it would leave behind some hidden dangers. Then where should we keep her? Bai Lu asked. No need. Let her be. Anyway, she can't leave the Huang Luo Palace. She's not weak. If she makes a move on my people, she's a smart person. Smart people will do smart things. Don't worry, she won't do that. But there's only one thing to be careful of. Don't let her get close to Bai Shuang. Bai Shuang was the queen of the mermaid clan. Her strength wasn't high. If Spectre really captured Bai Shuang, then the mermaid clan would be in a passive position. As long as Spectre was prevented from coming into contact with Bai Shuang, everything would be fine. After that, Lu Yi was led by Bai Lu to see the Grand Elder Yen Miao. He apologized to the mermaid clan for the last time and thanked them. The Grand Elder's words were the same as Bai Lu's. Lu Yi had helped the mermaid clan a lot. If the mermaid clan had a chance to repay them, they would be very happy. How could they complain? At the same time, the Grand Elder also said that if Lu Yi encountered a similar situation in the future, just lead the enemy over and let them deal with it. After this experience, they would definitely deal with similar situations better next time. Naturally, Lu Yi agreed. After chatting for a while, Lu Yi bid farewell and left. He didn't stay with the mermaid clan for too long. Lu Yi borrowed a seahorse star beast and rushed toward the constellation hall alone. Bai Lu wanted to accompany him, but Lu Yi rejected her. Although the journey wasn't long, he might encounter some dangers. There were still many moon jade star beasts in the sea. He naturally didn't want Bai Lu to take such a risk. Fortunately, the journey was relatively peaceful. After waiting for half a day, he arrived at the constellation hall. Lu Yi let the seahorse return on its own. He went forward and pushed the door of the constellation hall. He didn't encounter much resistance and the door slowly opened. After Lu Yi walked in, The door closed automatically. After his last attempt, Lu Yi knew that unless it was during the period of the Constellation Hall battle, no one but himself could open the door of the Constellation Hall. Therefore, this huge Constellation Hall was a special place for him to store his treasures. He had a lot of storage rings on him. They were filled with all kinds of things. It wasn't convenient to carry them around all the time, so he just left them here. After all, as long as he had the minor Constellation Hall, he could come here whenever he wanted. Lu Yi left most of the storage rings behind. He only brought 3 storage rings with him. One was for spirit jades and spirit crystals, one was for spirit pills and spirit treasures, and one was for miscellaneous items. In addition to the storage space on the back of his hand, it was definitely enough for him to use. In front of the black stone tablet that represented the accumulation list, a door was maintained. Lu Yi returned to the bottom of Matchless Island through this door. He swam a distance away before quietly returning to Matchless Island. After silently returning to the cave, Lu Yi began to deduce the other spirit runes while continuing to comprehend the small saber inheritance. After exchanging blows with Yu Yao, Lu Yi realized that the inheritance bestowed by the Constellation Hall was very practical. It was especially suitable for the battle between the Constellation Hall and Yu Yao. He didn't plan to raise his cultivation at the moment. Naturally, he had to spend more effort in this aspect so that he wouldn't be restricted when facing Moon Jade in the future. End of chapter. Chapter 1481. 7 days later, in the Mermaid Territory, in front of the Tian Luo Palace. The void shook, and a door appeared. Lu Yi stepped out. However, just as he stood still, he frowned. The Pan Shan saber at his waist popped out, and the saber flashed as it slashed forward. A blurry figure that was almost invisible faced the saber light. Just as it was about to be cut, the figure suddenly twisted and narrowly avoided the saber. Ghost's eyes were full of excitement. She stared at the door behind Lu Yi without blinking, as if she had smelled the scent of freedom. She was a smart woman. Naturally, she knew that if she wanted to get out of here, she couldn't count on Fa Wuzuan's mercy. She had to find a way. But this damned place was surrounded on all sides by water similar to the Wanxiang Sea. She couldn't escape at all. After thinking about it, the only way to leave here was to use Fa Wuzuan's unknown method to make the door. So, she deliberately hid her figure and breath and waited here. Sure enough, such an opportunity came. At this moment, she suddenly attacked. Even Lu Yi almost couldn't react in time. After avoiding the saber, she was only 1 step away from the door. As long as she took this step, she would be able to open the sea and sky. However, this step was like a moat. Ghost's figure suddenly flew out as if she had been hit by a heavy blow. As she rolled, her concealment failed and her figure was revealed. The 2 mermaids who stayed here were shocked and quickly put on a vigilant look. On the other side, Ghost, who had been repelled, turned over nimbly. With 1 hand on the ground, she half crouched on the ground like a cheetah ready to pounce. She looked at Lu Yi fiercely. "Fei Wuzuan, I don't want to fight with you. Get out of my way." Lu Yi stood in front of the door like a door god and looked at her indifferently. "It seems that you have recovered well. When he left 7 days ago, this guy was half dead. Now that he came back, he didn't see any major problems. Are you going to move or not?" Ghost gritted her teeth and shouted. Lu Yi didn't speak. He held the saber in 1 hand and raised his other hand, beckoning her with his finger. Ghost said angrily, "You asked for it." As his words fell, the afterimage of his body was clearly still in the same place, but his body had already swept to Lu Ye's side. His leg was like a whip, heavily swinging down. Lu Yi didn't seem to be able to react. Ghost's lips curled into a cold smile. Everyone thought that Ghost cultivators only knew how to kill, but she didn't walk the normal path. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to obtain such a high ranking in the Constellation Palace contest. In terms of close combat ability, she was not inferior to any weapon cultivator. It was just that she rarely revealed this side of her. However, at this moment, in order to escape, she could no longer care about it. Freedom was right in front of her. As long as she could defeat Fa Wuzuan, she would be able to leave this damned place. She had never thought of defeating Lu Yi, because it was unrealistic. Fa Wuzuan's strength was already impressive when he was in the middle stage of the constellation realm. Now that he was in the late stage of the constellation realm, Spectre admitted that she was no match for him. However, it shouldn't be too much of a problem if it was just to push him back. In order to achieve her goal, she had unleashed all of her strength. She knew that this battle couldn't be delayed. There were many Yu Yao on the merfolk's side. Once those Yu Yao arrived, she would never be able to escape. This whip kick was powerful and heavy. Although it didn't carry too much power, all of its explosive power was contained within. Even if there was a mountain in front of her, Spectre was confident that she could shatter it. However, in the next moment, Spectre's brows suddenly furrowed. This was because Lu Yi, who didn't seem to be able to react, suddenly looked in the direction of her true body. Then he raised a hand. With a pa sound, the whip kick was blocked by one of his big hands. After her attack failed, Spectre's afterimage remained in place while her true body moved to the other side and punched out. Her attack was blocked once again. Lu Ye's hand inexplicably blocked the path of her attack, easily blocking it. At the same time, his gaze shifted to her. Spectre was shocked. She knew that Fa Wuzuan was very strong, but she hadn't expected him to react so quickly. She gritted her teeth, and a red light suddenly erupted from her body. Clearly, she had activated some kind of explosive secret technique, causing her speed and strength to increase again. Asterisk pa pa pa. Asterisk dense sounds continuously rang out. Every time they rang out, spiritual power colliding and exploding. The two merfolk on guard duty were dumbfounded. This was because in their field of vision, it seemed as if countless phantoms had appeared and disappeared, circling around Lu Yi and attacking him relentlessly. They knew that they wouldn't be able to withstand such an onslaught for even an instant. However, such a violent and concentrated attack couldn't even make their clan's esteemed guest move a single step. He stood there calmly, his hand constantly blocking back and forth, perfectly blocking each attack. This scene was rather comical, as if a child who hadn't been satisfied was throwing a tantrum at an adult. In just 10 breaths, Spectre had changed her position countless times and launched countless attacks, but none of them were effective. She felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't understand how Fa Wuzuan could be so unreasonably strong as they were both at the late stage of the Constellation realm. For her to be able to rank near 200 in the Constellation Palace competition, her strength was naturally quite impressive. One had to know that the Constellation Palace competition was a competition between hundreds and thousands of galaxies, tens or even millions of constellations. Rank 200 wasn't very high, but it was definitely one of the best. However, at this moment, she couldn't move Fa Wuzuan at all. Of course, this was because she hadn't used her full strength, but when had Fa Wuzuan used his full strength? During the confrontation, Spectre suddenly retreated, her aura becoming mysterious and unpredictable. Her eyes became serious. Fa Wuzuan, be careful. I don't want to kill you. If you can't handle it, then hurry up and get out of my way. Saying so, her figure suddenly split into 2 into 4 into 8, Lu Yi observed with rapt attention and raised an eyebrow, because he found that he couldn't see through the 8 phantoms. These 8 phantoms all looked real, but he didn't know what kind of mysterious secret technique they were using. But from what Spectre had said just now, it was obvious she was going to put her life on the line. The 8 phantoms moved in unison, turning into 8 streams of light, fanning out towards Lu Yi as fast as lightning. Lu Yi suddenly felt his heart palpitate. How could he not know that this secret technique used by Spectre was incredibly powerful? The hand holding the mountain pan saber finally moved. With a push of the saber, a continuous stream of saber light began to burst forth. In an instant, the dense saber light was like the waves of the sea, wave after wave, endless and endless. The 8 phantoms arrived, their figures crisscrossing, turning Lu Ye's position into a land of death. In an instant, even Lu Yi felt a great pressure. Spectre's secret technique was extremely lethal and difficult to guard against. If he hadn't comprehended the saber technique in the dagger inheritance, it would have been difficult for him to resist with his previous tyrant saber art. Relatively speaking, the tyrant saber art was more inclined towards offense, while the dagger inheritance's saber art was both offensive and defensive. At this moment, the wave-like saber's light was constantly being shattered, but after it was shattered, new saber's light would appear. After 3 breaths, Lu Yi put away his saber. Spectre's true body appeared not far away, gasping for breath, her face slightly pale. It was obvious that the secret technique just now had taken a great toll on her. She looked in despair at Lu Yi, who was guarding the door like a door god, and her eyes became aggrieved. Then she sat down on the ground and wailed like a shrew. Wiping her tears, she shouted, "You bully me!" When Bai Lu and the other merfolk elders, who had sensed the commotion, arrived, they were just in time to see this scene that left them speechless. Pairs of eyes turned to look at Lu Yi. No one knew what he had done to make Spectre cry so sadly. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Lu Yi, full of accusation. Lu Yi frowned. He had never seen someone cry when they couldn't win, but Spectre had always been shameless. Others might not be able to do such a thing, but Spectre could. Spectre's crying was irritating, so Lu Yi pointed at her and said lightly, "If you cry again, you'll never be able to leave here." The wailing Spectre immediately stopped crying and covered her mouth with her hand, but her shoulders shook as she continued to sob. It seemed that she was really sad. Lu Yi glared at her, then turned to speak a few words with Yen Miao and the other elders, telling them what had just happened. After learning that it wasn't another invasion, Yen Miao and the others quickly dispersed, leaving only Bai Lu behind. After a while, the door slowly disappeared. Only then did Lu Yi leave. Even just now, he did not let his guard down. Who knew if Spectre would suddenly jump up and force her way through the door? She was capable of doing such a thing. "She hasn't caused you any trouble recently, has she?" Lu Yi asked Bai Lu. Bai Lu smiled. "You're right, she's a smart person, so although we didn't restrict her, she hasn't hurt any of our people." Lu Yi nodded. "We still have to be careful, we can't let her come into contact with Bai Shuang." "I know, there's always someone secretly guarding Bai Shuang. What are you talking about? Why don't you let me hear it?" Spectre sensed that the two of them were communicating through divine sense and immediately had an opinion. Her eyes were still red and swollen, but at this moment, she looked like she was bursting with curiosity, which was extremely comical. "It's none of your business," Lu Yi said in annoyance. Spectre came up and asked expectantly, "The Wuzuan, when are we leaving here?" Lu Yi glanced at her. "Did I say you could leave?" Spectre said, "You just said that if I don't cry, I can leave." "I said that if you cry again, you'll never be able to leave. Don't you mean the same thing?" Spectre said matter-of-factly. Lu Yi was too lazy to pay attention to her unreasonable pestering and changed the topic. "The matter of you causing trouble to others, we have to properly calculate. How do you want to settle it?" Spectre looked pitiful. "I don't have money anyway." Those who knew her well knew that she was poor. Chapter 1482. Of course, Lu Yi did not expect her to compensate him. That was meaningless to him. Besides, how much money could a poor ghost compensate him? He said leisurely, "You said that if I could survive, you would compensate me." Ghost blinked her big watery eyes. She wanted to deny it, but now that she was under his roof, she could not deny it. She could only laugh it off. "Did I say that? I don't remember." "Think about it carefully. I think you should remember." Lu Yi looked at Ghost intently. Ghost felt guilty under his stare. She said angrily, I said it. So what? How do you want me to compensate you? My body? If you can do it, then I can't resist." "That's not necessary. But I want to see the ghost tattoo on your body. I know you can't forget this." Ghost gritted her teeth. Last time, Fa Wuzuan said that he wanted to see the spiritual tattoo on breath concealment. In the end, she rejected him. She did not expect that Fa Wuzuan would still make this request. But now, the situation was different from last time. Ghost felt that if she refused, she would not be able to leave this place. But if he asked her to agree, she would not be happy. As she said last time, it was not a matter of money. After being angry for a while, Ghost said, "The ghost tattoo on breath concealment is in an inconvenient position. I am a woman and you are a man. How do you want to see it? Lu Yi thought for a moment and took out a shadow recording stone. If you feel embarrassed, I can ask Bai Lu to help me record it and watch it repeatedly. Ghost looked at the shadow recording stone in his hand in disbelief. You even prepared this. This was obviously premeditated. Fa Wuzuan was really shameless. Ghost took a deep breath and suddenly laughed. Fa Wuzuan, do you want to consider my proposal last time? What? Marry me and you can see whatever you want. Ghost tried to throw a flirtatious glance at Lu Yi as she spoke. But she was obviously not good at this. Her flirtatious glance was not good at all. Not only was it not seductive, but it also made people laugh. A toad wants to eat swan meat. Lu Yi snorted. The ghost froze for a moment, then immediately flew into a rage. Baring his fangs and brandishing his claws, he pounced on Lu Yi, shouting, "Who are you calling a toad?" They had gone too far. If this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? Lu Yi raised a finger and pressed it against Spectre's forehead. Spectre's arms were short, and she was not as tall as Lu Yi. She struggled for a while but still failed. How about this? You can inscribe the ghost tattoo. That's not too much to ask, right? Lu Yi asked. Ghost paused, thought for a moment, and nodded. That's more like it. She suddenly thought of something and said angrily, "Why didn't you say so when you saw the hidden ghost tattoo last time?" She had even taken off her shirt and suffered a great loss. Lu Yi looked at her coldly. How can a real ghostly tattoo be the same as the one you've inscribed? In terms of effect, it was naturally better to observe the real ghostly tattoo. However, the ghostly tattoo on the Spectre's body was not easy to observe, so he could only settle for the next best thing. He casually tossed a blank jade board to Ghost and told her to carve it herself. Lu Yi stood quietly to the side, waiting. However, he still had no idea how to deal with Spectre. It did not matter if the Merfolk clan was exposed or not. This was the Wanxiang Sea. Even if they were exposed, no one could do anything to them. However, the secret that he could open a door to this place could not be exposed. If it were someone unrelated, it would be best to kill them to silence them. However, Lu Yi could not bring himself to kill Spectre. It was unrealistic to let her go, so he had to find a way to restrict her so that she could not expose these secrets. Soul manipulation was one way. If Spectre was willing to let Lu Yi plant the soul manipulation tattoo, then everything would not be a problem. However, the soul manipulation tattoo required Spectre's cooperation to be successfully planted. If there was even the slightest resistance, it would definitely fail. For someone as proud as Spectre, how could she be willing to let Lu Yi plant the soul manipulation tattoo on her? If he really mentioned this to her, Spectre would definitely fight him to the death. It was also impossible to keep Spectre in the Merfolk clan's territory forever. Right now, she could play her part and not do anything to the Merfolk clan because she had hope in her heart that she would be able to leave here sooner or later. However, if she was imprisoned here for too long, it was hard to guarantee that she would not do something drastic. Lu Yi was not worried about anything else, but he was afraid that she would one day hold Bai Shuang hostage. At that time, the Merfolk clan would probably really fight to the death with her. Lu Yi had been thinking about this matter for the past few days, but unfortunately he still had no clue. Li Tai Bai, are you in a dilemma about how to deal with her? Just when Lu Yi felt that it was difficult to deal with, Bai Lu suddenly transmitted a message to him. Lu Yi turned his head in surprise. You can tell? Bai Lu nodded. Although I don't know what your relationship is, I can see from your interactions that you have some friendship, but not much. It also seems that you have some grudges. You don't want to kill her, but you also don't want to let her go, so you are in a dilemma. Lu Yi really did not expect Bai Lu to have such a pure and intelligent side. Her observation skills were quite meticulous. He did not deny it and nodded. I am indeed thinking about how to deal with her. Have you thought of a way? Lu Yi shook his head. Not for the time being. Bai Lu smiled and said, do you want the kind of method that can make her keep a secret without restricting her too much? Exactly. If the restriction was too great, the ghost would absolutely not agree to a method like soul control. Hearing you say that, it seems that you have a way? Bai Lu smiled. I might really have a way. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. Tell me about it. Bai Lu shook her head. I can't say, but if you only have that kind of request, this method should work, so I have to give it a try. Then let's give it a try. Lu Yi agreed. Anyway, there was nothing he could do. Bai Lu had a way, so naturally he would let her try it. If it really worked, the problem in front of him could be solved. Bai Lu got his permission and said something to the mermaid who had been guarding here. The mermaid obeyed and quickly left. A moment later, the mermaid returned, but this time, she brought 2 of her people with her. They were 2 mermaids and they looked exactly the same. It seemed like they were twins. The 2 sisters came before Bai Lu and bowed respectfully to her first, then to Lu Yi. Ghost, who was inscribing ghostly patterns on the side, glanced at them curiously. She had long sensed that Lu Ye's status here wasn't low, so she didn't find it strange. Bai Lu said something to the twin mermaid sisters, and the 2 sisters immediately took out an item each. Lu Yi looked closely and found that they had taken out 2 golden conches. They looked exactly the same as her azure sea conch, but the color was different. This was clearly something from the celestial conch hall, but she didn't know what they were used for. The conches in the celestial conch hall had all kinds of strange effects. Lu Ye's conch could open the door to the celestial conch hall, Yen Miao's conch could disperse the star beasts in the sea, and the other mermaids' conches had their own wonders. However, these 2 golden conches didn't just have the same color, but also the same texture. After handing over their golden conches, the 2 sisters left. Bai Lu said to Lu Yi, I want a drop of her blood. Lu Yi nodded and unsheathed his Pan-Shan saber. Before Ghost could react, she felt a sharp pain on the back of her hand. She quickly jumped up and looked at Lu Yi warily. What are you doing? Lu Ye's saber had already returned to its scabbard, and he held a drop of Ghost's blood in his hand. He didn't even look at her. Shut up. Bai Lu smiled at Ghost, motioning for her not to be nervous. Then she raised her hand and slit her palm, causing a drop of blood to flow out. She put her fingers together again, and with a surge of spiritual energy, the blood on Lu Ye's palm flew over and merged with her own blood. Ghost had a bad feeling. Wuzuan, what the hell are you doing? Mermaids were a very rare and strange race. Who knew what kind of strange abilities they had? Taking a drop of her blood like this was obviously a strange secret technique. Ghost couldn't be at ease. She didn't know what was going on, and how would Lu Yi know? Bai Lu didn't tell him at all. The merged blood was split into 2 by Bai Lu and dripped onto the 2 golden conches. Strangely enough, after the 2 golden conches absorbed the blood, they suddenly turned into 2 golden lights and merged with each other. Just like the 2 drops of blood, they were indistinguishable from each other. The essence of the golden light was a mass of golden liquid, which was obviously formed by the 2 golden conches. Bai Lu took out a shell and placed the golden light on it. She tilted her head back and drank half of it, then handed it to Lu Yi. Let her drink it. Lu Yi nodded, took the shell, and handed it to Ghost. Drink it. Ghost stared at the golden light on the shell in horror. She covered her mouth and shook her head. I don't want to. She didn't even know what this thing was. How could she drink it? Either drink it or be trapped here for the rest of your life. It's your choice. Lu Yi looked at her expressionlessly. Ghost frowned. If I drink it, you'll take me away? Drink it first. As for when I'll take you away, it depends on your performance. Fa Wuzuan, don't go too far. Although I'm not as strong as you, and I'm a woman, I have a backbone. I don't even know what this thing is. How can I drink it? You have to at least let me know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not poisonous. Ghost believed this because Bai Lu had drunk half of it just now. Can you help me ask around? What exactly is this? Ghost was still worried. Lu Yi frowned, turned to Bai Lu and asked. He also wanted to know what it was. Bai Lu smiled. Tell her that as long as she drinks this, she'll be my sister in life and death from now on. Lu Yi didn't doubt her and told her the truth. End of chapter. Chapter 1483. Ghost's expression became strange. Is this a ceremony for the merfolk to become sworn brothers? This merfolk has taken a fancy to me and wants to become sworn brothers with me? It didn't make sense. She had been here for a few days recently, but this merfolk didn't treat her particularly well. After thinking for a while, Ghost asked, "What is her status here?" She didn't have much contact with the merfolk, but it wasn't difficult to see that Bai Lu's status here wasn't low. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and said, "Bai Lu is the princess of this merfolk clan." Ghost was stunned. She obviously didn't expect Bai Lu's status to be so noble. On second thought, she was a princess, and she drank the golden thing, so there shouldn't be any problem. Moreover, looking at Wu Zun's posture, if she didn't drink it, she most likely wouldn't be able to escape. If she was forced to drink it, then the scene wouldn't be pretty. After making up her mind, Ghost looked at Lu Yi. "Remember what you said. If I drink this, you will take me away. If you dare to tease me, I will fight you to the death." With that said, she took the shell from Lu Yi's hand and drank it all. She was smart. When she drank the golden light, she had already wrapped it with her spiritual power. Once she got out of here, she would spit it out. This little trick wasn't difficult for her. But what surprised her was that although she had used her spiritual power to envelop it, the moment the golden light entered her abdomen, the binding of her spiritual power lost its effect. Then, Ghost felt a warm current rising from her abdomen. That warm current seemed to have turned into a living thing, like an invisible little snake that quickly slithered in her body. Her face changed, and she hurriedly immersed herself in investigating. At the same time, she urged her spiritual power to suppress it, but it was completely useless. In just 2 short breaths, the invisible snake swam to her arm. A slight tingling pain came, and then there was no more abnormality. She hurriedly lowered her head and looked at the place where the tingling pain came from, only to see that there was an additional spiral mark in that position. "What is this?" She looked up and glared at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was surprised. The mark looked the same as the one he had left behind with the blue sea conch. The only difference was that the mark on the ghost's arm was gold, while the one he had left behind with the blue sea conch was cyan. He looked at Bai Lu in confusion, only to see Bai Lu smile and flip her arm over. On the inside of her arm, there was also a golden spiral mark. Lu Yi blurted out, "You can think of this mark as a symbol of you sisters becoming sworn sisters." Ghost obviously didn't believe his nonsense. She just stared at Bai Lu, wanting her to give an explanation. Bai Lu flipped her palm, and a short spear-like weapon appeared in her hand. Before Lu Yi could react, she suddenly turned the spearhead and stabbed herself in the abdomen. Although this kind of weapon forged by the Merfolk clan did not have any restrictions, it was extremely sharp. Even if Bai Lu had the strength of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator and her body was not ordinary, this spear still directly pierced through her lower abdomen without using spiritual power to protect her body. Blood splashed out, but she didn't even frown. Only a trace of pain flashed through her eyes. Lu Yi was shocked, completely unaware of what she was doing. But something even more surprising happened. As Bai Lu stabbed with the spear, she didn't cry out, but Ghost next to her screamed. She reached out to cover her abdomen, as if she had suffered a heavy blow, and her body instinctively retreated. Lu Yi could clearly see that the place she was covering was exactly the same as the place where Bai Lu had stabbed her. Blood was flowing out from between her fingers. Bai Lu pulled out the short spear and slashed her arm with lightning speed. A bloody wound immediately appeared on her fair arm. At the same time, Ghost, who clearly didn't suffer any attack, had the exact same injury on the same part of her body. Bai Lu said, "Tell her that no matter how far apart we are from each other in the future, we will be closely connected. She will suffer the same injuries that I suffer. If I die, she won't be able to live either." Lu Yi looked at Bai Lu with a grave expression. "There's no need for that." If he had known that Bai Lu was going to use such a method, he wouldn't have agreed. But before Bai Lu used this method, she didn't explain it to him at all. Lu Yi thought that the Merfolk clan had some special secret technique. But now it seemed that it wasn't the Merfolk clan's secret technique, but the effect of the 2 golden conches. The 2 golden conches were wonderful things brought out by a pair of twins on the Merfolk clan side from the Tian Luo Palace Hall. The Merfolk clan had obviously seen through their effects long ago, but they had never had a chance to use them. Because this kind of thing, which was closely connected to each other's lives, didn't have much use in itself. This time, after seeing Lu Ye's dilemma, Bai Lu decisively used it. Before using it, she deliberately didn't explain the situation to Lu Yi because she knew that once she did, Lu Yi would definitely not agree. It was better to act first and report later. Feeling Lu Ye's heavy mood, Bai Lu smiled slightly. It's okay, as long as it can help you. Can it be removed? Lu Yi asked. If it couldn't be removed, then Bai Lu's life would really be tied to ghosts in the future. Bai Lu wouldn't encounter too much danger in the Merfolk clan's territory, but Ghost was wandering outside and encountered a lot of danger. When the time came, it would inevitably implicate Bai Lu. Maybe one day Bai Lu would suffer an unexpected disaster. Yes, as long as both sides agree, the mark can be removed. But before she is obedient, I think it's best not to remove it. When the two were talking, Ghost also faintly realized the mystery of the mark, but she wasn't sure. She could only ask, Puwuzuan, what the hell is going on? Lu Yi looked at her and told her what Bai Lu had just said. Ghost was completely stunned. She had thought that he was going to become sworn brothers with her. Who would have thought that her life would be tied to his? He was right. This time, they were really going to live and die together. She was annoyed for a moment. Wuzuan, is this how you treat me? You're too despicable. So you'd better be obedient. Ghost was so angry that her nose was crooked. She wanted to curse, but on second thought, she thought of something and suddenly laughed. She's the Merfolk clan's princess. Her status is noble. I don't believe that she will die together with me just to kill me. I, Ghost, have a worthless life. Now that someone is willing to live and die with me, it's still a gain for me. And since she can control my life and death, it seems like I can control her life and death as well. With that said, she raised her hand and summoned a dagger. Lu Yi found it familiar. It was the dagger she had pulled out from the skeleton general's eye socket. Ghost's eyes were filled with eagerness as she threatened Lu Yi. Hurry up and take me out, or I won't be polite. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed down on the hilt of the mountain pan saber. Ghost was also decisive. The dagger directly slashed across her arm, immediately leaving a wound. As expected, a similar wound appeared on Bai Lu's arm. Blood flowed freely. Lu Yi frowned. The effects of the two golden conches were too strange. He couldn't feel any mysterious energy fluctuations at all. But whether it was Bai Lu or Ghost, as long as one of them was injured, the other would definitely suffer the same injury. Bai Lu clearly saw through Ghost's plan. She lowered her head and looked at the wound on her arm. She didn't move at all. She only raised her head and smiled at Ghost. This smile made Ghost feel inexplicably creeped out. Then, she saw Bai Lu slowly raise the short spear and aim the tip of the spear at her own chest. What are you doing? Ghost panicked. Bai Lu's expression didn't change. She was still smiling. The dagger in her hand slowly pierced her chest. Blood flowed out, dyeing the shell red. The dagger was slowly but surely piercing toward the depths of her heart. This time, not only did Ghost panic, but even Lu Ye's expression changed. Don't. Ghost screamed and hurriedly rushed over. She grabbed the dagger in Bai Lu's hand and shook her head at her pleadingly. Although this kind of injury wasn't fatal for a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, it would definitely greatly damage her vitality. Ghost had never expected that the mermaid princess, who looked so charming, would be so ruthless in her actions. Bai Lu's hand stopped moving. She raised a finger and tapped it on Ghost's forehead. The ethereal song of enlightenment rang out. Then Bai Lu's divine sense surged. Lu Yi didn't know what she said to Ghost, but Ghost's expression began to soften. She nodded repeatedly and even revealed a look of pleasant surprise. A moment later, the two women began to heal their wounds. Their injuries looked terrible, but they knew when to stop. For late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators like them, these were only superficial wounds that could be easily healed. Ghost had completely calmed down. Lu Yi could even see that she was faintly looking forward to something, but he didn't know what she was looking forward to. Curious, he asked Bai Lu, "What did you say to her just now?" Lu Yi had a rough idea of Ghost's temperament. She was the kind of person who wouldn't budge even if she was led along. He just didn't know what method Bai Lu had used to appease her. I told her that the secret technique's effect isn't just to let us live and die together. If we cultivate together, the efficiency of our cultivation will also be greatly increased. You lied to her? Lu Yi asked. Bai Lu laughed. No, it's true. Then she's profited. Although sharing life and death together was indeed a constraint, if it could greatly increase the efficiency of their cultivation, it wasn't unacceptable. Lu Yi even suspected that if he had told Ghost about this from the beginning, she might not have refused. Ghost's matter could be considered resolved. With Bai Lu here to constrain her, she probably knew what to say and what not to say after leaving this place. Lu Yi said to Bai Lu with a straight face, if you make similar decisions in the future, you'll have to discuss it with me first. Bai Lu had acted arbitrarily today, undoubtedly knowing that he wouldn't agree. Although the result was quite good, Lu Yi didn't want something similar to happen again. End of chapter. Chapter 1484. Got it. Bai Lu nodded obediently and stuck out her tongue playfully at Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked helpless. He turned to Ghost and said, hurry up and finish inscribing your ghostly tattoo. Ghost felt wronged. Why are you being so mean? Why are you being so mean to the mermaid princess? Ghost continued inscribing her ghostly tattoo while Lu Yi waited quietly. The mysterious power of the two golden conches reminded him of the life origin technique. Speaking of which, after he formed the life origin technique with Hupa, he and Hupa were in a state of life and death. The effect was very similar to Bai Lu and Ghost's state. However, there was a difference. The life origin technique simply made Hupa's life depend on his safety. In other words, if he died, Hupa would die with him. However, if Hupa died, he wouldn't suffer any harm. From this point of view, the life origin technique was more effective than the two golden conches. The other difference was that their injuries wouldn't be synchronized. Lu Yi had long thought of dispelling the life origin technique. As his cultivation increased, the enemies he encountered would become stronger and stronger. No one knew what kind of danger he would encounter in the future. If he caused Hupa to die with him, then Yi wouldn't be able to live either. However, he obtained the life origin technique from the realm of beasts. It was easy to form it, but dispelling it wasn't so easy. The life origin technique manifested on his chest. There was a complicated pattern that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. It was clearly something like a spiritual tattoo. Lu Yi felt that he should be able to use the talent tree to deduce the mysteries of this spiritual tattoo and find a way to dispel it. With that thought, he made up his mind. After he finished deducing the aura-concealing spiritual tattoo, he would start deducing the life origin technique's spiritual tattoo. A moment later, Ghost finished inscribing the ghostly tattoo and returned the jade tablet to him. Lu Yi took it and inspected it. He asked casually, you didn't miss anything or intentionally miss anything, right? Ghost glared at him hatefully. Do you want me to take off my clothes for you to inspect? Lu Yi looked up at her. If you're willing, don't even think about it. Ghost huffed. I've fulfilled my promise. When are you going to take me away from here? Although she really wanted to try cultivating with Bai Lu and see how much more efficient it would be, there was no rush. There would be opportunities in the future. I'll come pick you up in a few days. Lu Yi put away the jade tablet. The door of the Azure Sea Snail had long been closed. He had to return to the unparalleled island from the Constellation Hall. He could only come back in 7 days to bring Spectre back. After instructing Bai Lu to keep an eye on Ghost, Lu Yi left the merfolk's territory. Just like the previous time, Zhang Xian borrowed a seahorse star beast and rushed toward the Constellation Hall. Lu Yi found that as long as his luck wasn't particularly bad, he wouldn't encounter any moon jade star beasts. Furthermore, the seahorses were very fast in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Even if they encountered one, they would have a chance of escaping. Lu Yi allowed the seahorse to return on its own, then pushed open the door to the Constellation Palace and returned to Matchless Island through the door that had always been open. Instead of returning to his cave, Lu Yi went to the Island of Versatility. He had lost the starboat he bought last time. He had to buy another one. Otherwise, It would be inconvenient for him to travel. Lu Yi only spent 20 to 30,000 spirit jades on the lost star boat, so he didn't feel the pinch. In the past, he didn't have many spirit jades on hand, so he could only buy whatever was cheap. Now that he was rich, he naturally wanted to buy something better and more expensive. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't handle a battleship alone, Lu Yi would have bought a battleship. After contacting Chao Xiang in advance, Lu Yi received a warm reception. He spent a total of 300,000 spirit jades to buy a high-quality star boat. Lu Yi drove the star boat straight to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lu Yi was very satisfied with the star boat's various functions. As the saying goes, you get what you pay for. This star boat was several times better than his previous one, be it in terms of control or comfort. It was also faster. It wasn't that his previous star boat couldn't fly at such a fast speed. It could also fly at such a fast speed. However, if there was an unbreakable obstacle in front of him, he wouldn't be able to dodge it in time. When that happened, he would crash into it, and the boat would be destroyed and the passengers would be injured. However, the star boat was different. Even if it flew at a faster speed, if there was an unbreakable obstacle in front of him, the array would be able to warn him in time, allowing the cultivator to dodge it with ease. Moreover, if his previous star boat crashed into some small meteorites, there would be a very obvious tremor. However, the star boat didn't feel anything at all. It was undoubtedly more durable. Lu Yi wanted to go to the mermaid clan's territory to pick up Ghost. Naturally, he couldn't set off from the Matchless Island. Otherwise, when Ghost appeared in the cave on the Matchless Island, she would immediately know that Fa Wuzuan was Li Taibai. Therefore, he could only find a remote location and pick her up before making further plans. Lu Yi wouldn't set her free for the time being. As for how to settle her down, he already had a plan in mind. After 2 or 3 days, he found a desolate star and landed on it. Then, he found a secluded place and waited. While waiting, Lu Yi took out the ghost pattern jade plate that Ghost's spirit had inscribed. As he studied it, he activated the power of the talent tree and began to derive new spirit patterns based on the original aura concealing spirit pattern. A few days later, when the Azure Sea Snail could be used, Lu Yi took it out and blew it, opening the door to the Heavenly Sea Snail Palace. Because he had warned them before he left last time, Lu Yi saw Bai Lu and Ghost waiting for him as soon as he appeared. Bai Lu nodded at Lu Yi with a smile. Then, she nudged Ghost beside her. Ghost walked forward reluctantly and came to Lu Ye's side. She said, "Wuzuan, I want to stay here for a while longer." Before Lu Yi frowned. Previously, this girl was so desperate to leave. Why did she change her mind after not seeing her for a few days? Cultivate. It's very efficient to cultivate with Bai Lu. Besides, we don't have to worry about resources here. I think I'll be able to advance to Yu Yao after a while. Ghost said excitedly. Bai Lu had told her that if they cultivated together, their efficiency would be greatly improved. She already had some expectations, but who knew that when she really started cultivating, she would discover that the improvement was beyond her imagination. What attracted her more than the increase in cultivation efficiency was that she didn't have to worry about not having enough spirit jades here. She had seen the spirit jade vein in the merfolk's territory with her own eyes. At that time, her eyes had lit up. If Bai Lu hadn't held her back, she probably would have rushed down to fill her storage ring. For a poor person like her to come to this place was like a sex fiend entering a brothel, the kind that could be bought for free. She suddenly realized that this was a really good place. It was so good that she didn't want to leave. If Bai Lu hadn't reminded her today, she would have forgotten that Lu Yi was coming to pick her up. This trip was a blessing in disguise. She had long forgotten all the unpleasant things that had happened before. I want to cultivate here for another half a year. Come pick me up after half a year. At that time, before Ghost could finish speaking, Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed her by the neck. Then he threw her into the door. I'm leaving first. I'll come again next time. Lu Yi waved at Bai Lu, then turned and entered the door. I'll kill you. Ghost had just steadied herself when she pounced on Lu Yi with bared fangs and brandished claws. She looked like she wanted to tear Lu Yi apart. Wuzuan was really too infuriating. She had wanted to leave before, but Fa Wuzuan wouldn't take her with him. Now that she wanted to stay, Fa Wuzuan threw her out. Ghost had never been so wronged in her life. A moment later, Ghost, who had been punched by Lu Yi after exchanging a few blows with him, hugged her head with both hands and calmed down. She was weaker than him, so there was nothing she could do. She swore to herself that when she became a Yu Yao, she would definitely teach this guy a lesson. "Give me your star map." Lu Yi stretched out a hand to her. "What for?" Ghost looked at him warily. "Cut the crap." Lu Yi's gaze turned cold. Spectre reluctantly took out her star chart, and Lu Yi did something to it before tossing it back to her. "There is a matchless island on the Vientiane Sea. Go there." Although Ghost wouldn't say anything she shouldn't say with Bai Lu around, Lu Yi wasn't going to let her out of his sight for the time being. Moreover, the matchless island was really short on manpower. If Ghost went there, she would be of some help. "Ha!" Ghost sneered. She raised her head slightly and pointed her chin at Lu Yi. "Beg me. See if I'll go if you beg me." Lu Yi said unhurriedly, "I'm the only one who can take you to the mermaid territory." The sneer on Ghost's face stiffened. She was annoyed for a moment. After a moment of silence, she said, "What's so special about the matchless island that you're interested in? You don't have to worry about it. Just go there. They're short on manpower now. If you accept their invitation, it won't be difficult for you to enter. Give me a deadline. You can't make me stay there forever, right? That depends on your performance." Lu Yi glanced at her indifferently and soared into the sky. Ghost gritted her teeth as she watched Lu Yi leave. She waved her fist in the direction Lu Yi left, as if she wanted to beat him to death. After a moment, she calmed down and took out her star map to check. "Matchless Island? What bullshit is this? I've never heard of it." She had been in the 10,000 Elephant Sea for many years. She came here after she was promoted to a constellation mansion. She knew all the powerful and famous spiritual islands in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and Unparalleled Island was not one of them. She was sure that this was a deserted island without any fame. It wasn't even marked on the star map. After some investigation, it was just as she thought. The location of the matchless island on the star map was relatively remote. It was only marked as a deserted island. She didn't want to go, but she had to go. She missed the cultivation environment of the mermaid tribe. Especially after her recent contact with Bai Lu, she learned about the existence of the Celestial Spiral Palace. She knew that it was a secret realm where she could gain benefits. However, she needed the Mermaid Queen's permission to enter the Celestial Spiral Palace. She had no choice but to take out her planetary boat and fly toward the Vientiane Sea. End of chapter. Chapter 1485. Following the guidance of the star chart in her hand, Ghost arrived at Peerless Island in a few days. She didn't expose herself. Instead, she hid nearby and investigated the situation. At first, she thought that this was just a nameless, deserted island that some small fry had come to occupy. Who knew that when she arrived, she would discover that something was amiss. The island was enveloped by an extremely powerful protective formation. What surprised her even more was that she wasn't the only ghost cultivator in the vicinity. She could sense that there were several ghost cultivators hiding in the dark, as if they were monitoring the situation on Peerless Island. There were even some who were brazenly observing from afar. Ghost was at a loss. Wasn't this just a deserted island? Who had nothing better to do than to set up such a large formation here? What were these people secretly spying on Peerless Island doing? Logically speaking, there were many deserted islands like this on the myriad manifestation sea. They were all worthless. Normally, no one would occupy them. However, what she saw in front of her made her very confused. Now that Peerless Island was enveloped by the formation, the starry sky energy produced by reversing the seawater in the minor constellation hall was blocked. Therefore, those outside Peerless Island couldn't sense anything unusual on the island. Ghost naturally thought that Peerless Island was a deserted island. While investigating, Ghost suddenly saw a familiar figure. She finally understood why Fa Wuzuan had asked her to come here. It was because she saw Chu Shen. She roughly knew about the relationship between Chu Shen and Fa Wuzuan. Back then, when she had asked Fa Wuzuan to help her enter the exclusive scene, she had asked Chu Shen to pass on a message. Upon closer inspection, Ghost realized that Chu Shen's status here wasn't low. The people on the island were very respectful to him. Since she was already here, she could only go in and take a look. She didn't know why Fa Wuzuan had asked her to come here. However, in order to be able to go to the merfolk's territory anytime in the future, she could only endure the humiliation and compromise. Everything would have to wait until she became Yu Yao. She didn't show herself. Instead, she took out a musical note and sent a message to Chu Shen. The two of them had exchanged musical note imprints back in the minor constellation hall. Chu Shen, who was talking to someone on the island, sensed something. He took out a musical note and looked at it. His expression lit up. Then, he quietly controlled the island's formation and opened a gap. Ghost had been waiting there for a long time. In a flash, she came in. As soon as she set foot on the matchless island, Spectre's expression changed. This was because she could feel an extremely pure and rich starry sky energy coming from this place. Suddenly, he realized that the Wushuang Island was not a deserted island, but a spiritual island. But how was this possible? If it was spiritual island, it would have been occupied by a force long ago. Why would it still be here today? When she was observing from the outside just now, although she didn't see the full picture of the people on the island, she could roughly see that there weren't many people here, and their cultivations were generally not high. Many of them were in the early stage of the constellation realm, and it seemed that Chu Shen was the leader. What right did such a force have to occupy a spiritual island? Moreover, it was a spiritual island of this level. After sensing for a while, Ghost was sure that the unparalleled island could be considered a middle-grade spiritual island based on the energy density. There were many spiritual islands on the Vientiane Sea. Some were good, some were bad. The standard to judge them was the cosmic energy on the island. Those spiritual islands that had cosmic energy but couldn't satisfy the constellation realm's cultivation were the lowest grade of low-grade spiritual islands. In the entire Vientiane Sea, there were many of such spiritual islands. Most of them were occupied by the less powerful realms. Although it couldn't satisfy the constellation realm's cultivation, if one cultivated on such spiritual islands, they could save some spiritual jades and increase the efficiency of their cultivation. Therefore, there was still some value in it, although it wasn't very valuable. Even so, low-grade spiritual islands like these were fought over by countless realms. This was because no matter how many low-grade spiritual islands there were, they couldn't outnumber the realms where the cultivators came from. Cultivators came from different galaxies and different realms. All of them needed a place to settle down. Occupying a deserted island was meaningless. If one wasn't strong enough, he could only think of occupying a low-grade spiritual island. Most of the fights between spiritual islands on the Vientiane Sea happened on low-grade spiritual islands. Above the low-grade spiritual islands were middle-grade spiritual islands like the Matchless Island. The cosmic energy on such spiritual islands could satisfy the cultivation needs of the constellation realm cultivators. In other words, one could cultivate on such a spiritual island even if they didn't have any spiritual jades. If they used spiritual jades, their cultivation efficiency would be higher. The value of such spiritual islands was undoubtedly much higher than that of low-grade spiritual islands. On the Vientiane Sea, the forces that were qualified to occupy such spiritual islands were extremely powerful. Above that were the high-grade spiritual islands. The cosmic energy on these islands was so dense that it could even satisfy Yu Yao's cultivation needs. The forces that occupied these spiritual islands were undoubtedly much stronger than those that occupied middle-grade spiritual islands. Usually, they were occupied by groups of cultivators from an entire galaxy. Basically, there wouldn't be any major conflicts between these spiritual islands. This was because once a conflict broke out, it would be a war between two galaxies. When that happened, many people would be involved and it would be difficult to resolve. In history, there was once a conflict between two high-grade spiritual islands, which led to a large-scale conflict that lasted for 10 years. In that conflict, More than 10 high-grade spiritual islands and hundreds of middle-grade and low-grade spiritual islands were involved. During that 10 years, the entire Vientiane Sea was in chaos. In the end, Nicho from the Vientiane galaxy couldn't stand it anymore and stepped in to quell the conflict. This was also one of the reasons why Nicho from the outside was not allowed to stay on the Vientiane Sea for long periods of time. Without Nicho from the outside, Nicho from the local territory could still suppress some unfavorable situations. However, if every powerful galaxy had Nicho from the local territory, once a large-scale conflict broke out, Nicho from the local territory would be helpless. Above the high-grade spiritual islands, there was actually another grade, which was the highest grade of spiritual islands. This was because the cosmic energy on these spiritual islands was so dense that it could give birth to spiritual jade veins. For example, the Vientiane Island was such a top-grade spiritual island. Although Lu Yi had entered and exited the Vientiane Island many times, there was one area that he had never been to before. That was the forbidden area of the Vientiane Island, where the entrance to the spiritual jade veins was located. Yu Yao guarded that area all year round, and anyone who dared to trespass would be killed without mercy. In the entire Vientiane Sea, there weren't many top-grade spiritual islands like the Vientiane Island. There were less than 50 of them. This meant that the 50 spiritual jade veins were all occupied by the top-grade forces. Since ancient times, no one had been able to shake their position. Spiritual jade veins were extremely precious. They meant an endless supply of cultivation resources, which was what cultivators desired the most. Generally speaking, only top-grade regions could give birth to spiritual jade veins. For example, although the 9 continents had been upgraded to a large region, it would still take many years to accumulate enough resources to give birth to spiritual jade veins. Spiritual jade veins could not only produce spiritual jades, but also spiritual crystals. These were important resources for Yu Yao's cultivation. In other words, having a spiritual jade vein meant that one could nurture more powerful cultivators. The Peerless Island was far from being a top-grade spiritual island. It was at most a middle-grade spiritual island. Even so, it was enough to shock Ghost. She couldn't understand why such a spiritual island wasn't marked on the star map, and why it was occupied by Chu Shen and his people. Following Chu Shen's instructions, Ghost came to a large hall. This should be the guest hall, which was mainly used to receive guests. It was obvious that it had been built not long ago. The furnishings in the room were very new. She slowly revealed herself. Chu Shen had already walked in with a smile on his face. He cupped his fists and bowed. "Senior Sister Ghost, why are you here?" They had met before, so they weren't unfamiliar with each other. However, Chu Shen couldn't understand why Ghost would come here. They didn't have any special relationship. Ghost thought for a moment and said, Wu Zuan asked me to come." This guy was Fa Wu Zuan's underling. Some things couldn't be hidden from him. Hence, Ghost could only tell him the truth. "My big brother asked you to come?" It was only then that Chu Shen reacted. Thinking about it, it was not strange. Phoenix, Great Pharaoh, and Ghost were familiar with each other. Now that Peerless Island was in dire need of manpower, especially for someone as strong as Ghost, it was natural for Phoenix, Great Pharaoh, to ask her for help. He was secretly happy. He was just worrying about where to find suitable manpower. Fa Lao actually asked Ghost to come. She came at the right time. "Since my big brother asked you to come, Senior Sister, you can stay here. If you need anything, just let me know." Chu Shen's attitude was warm. Ghost nodded and asked, "What's up with this spiritual island?" "What do you mean?" Chu Shen didn't understand. Such a spiritual island should have been occupied by someone long ago. Why? She wanted to ask why it was his turn, but it didn't seem right. Chu Shen already understood what she meant. He smiled and said, "Senior Sister, you don't know. This was originally a deserted island. I brought people and occupied it before it became lively." Ghost was enlightened. "I see." She was just wondering why no one would take a fancy to this spiritual island. It turned out that it was a reincarnated spiritual island. Chu Shen's luck was truly exceptional. She had naturally heard about the reincarnated spiritual islands. However, after so many years, There were countless spiritual islands in the Vientiane Sea. Only a few of them had been reincarnated as spiritual islands. Furthermore, they were all low-grade spiritual islands. However, Spectre quickly realized that something was amiss. If one were to truly be reborn from a deserted island, there would be a slow transformation process. This process would take at least a few years or even a decade. However, Chu Shen had previously participated in the Constellation Hall tournament in Constellation Hall. Not much time had passed since the Constellation Hall tournament ended. How long had it been? When did this island become lively? Ghost asked. Chu Shen thought for a moment and said, "It happened about a month ago. When we came here, this place was desolate. There wasn't even a bit of energy left. But after a few days, it started to change. It's like this now." More than a month. Ghost widened her eyes and looked at Chu Shen in disbelief. She almost thought that he was lying to her. End of chapter. Chapter 1486. The transformation of a deserted island was a very slow process. It was not something that could be completed in a day. A few years or more was already considered fast. In just a month, a deserted island had become a mid-tier spiritual island. Ghost could not believe it, but there was no reason for Chu Shen to lie to her about such things. Furthermore, it had not been long since the Constellation Hall ended. Even if Chu Shen had come here immediately after the Constellation Hall battle ended, it had only been 3 months. Is the energy on the island still increasing? Ghost suddenly thought of a key point. Chu Shen said, "It's increasing every day. Especially after we set up the defensive array, the increase is very obvious." Ghost was shocked. "Doesn't that mean—" She did not dare to continue, but Chu Shen nodded seriously. "This is definitely not the final state of Unparalleled Island. In the future, it might become a high-tier spiritual island or even a top-tier spiritual island." Ghost could not help but be dazed. Chu Shen left. He was now the palace master of the Unparalleled Palace and the island master of the Unparalleled Island. He had to deal with all the matters on the island personally, so he was very busy. There were quite a number of residences on the island, and he got Spectre to choose a place to settle down before he went off to get busy. Ghost walked out of the guest hall and walked around Unparalleled Island. She felt the decent energy of the stars on the island, and her gloomy mood improved a lot. Originally, she was unhappy that Fa Wuzuan had forced her to come to Unparalleled Island. If not for the chance to go to the mermaid territory in the future, she would not have cared. But now, it seemed that Fa Wuzuan's actions only brought her benefits and no harm. As long as she was on Unparalleled Island, she could cultivate without the help of spiritual jades. Due to the uniqueness of her cultivation, she needed a lot of spirit jades. The more spirit jades she consumed, the faster her strength improved. Therefore, she had always used the little bit of spirit jades she had on hand to increase her strength, causing her to appear as a pauper. Previously, Lu Yi had only given her 300,000 spiritual jades, and she had used them all. Now, she was penniless. Even her future cultivation was a problem. But if she stayed on Unparalleled Island, even without spiritual jades, she could still improve her strength. It was just that the speed would be slower. If the Peerless Island really became a top-notch spiritual island in the future, even if she became a Yu Yao, she would have a good place to cultivate. Realizing this, her original dissatisfaction and resentment towards Fa Wuzuan instantly vanished. Ghost even wanted to thank him in person. This Unparalleled Island was a treasure trove. He had to gain a foothold here. This was especially true given the current situation on Peerless Island. They were currently in dire need of talents. She, Ghost, was one of the top 200 on the Constellation Hall's rankings. It wouldn't be long before she would be promoted to the same level as Yu Yao. As long as she put in a little effort, she would definitely be put in an important position. After pondering for a moment, he went to look for the busy Chu Shen and changed the way he addressed him. "Island Master, I have a friend who is homeless. May I know if you can take him in?" Chu Shen pondered for a moment and said, "Since he's seen your sister's friend, there's naturally no problem. Just call him over." Previously, he had asked Lucky Star to recruit people on Zhaolai Island because the situation had forced him to do so. Because he wanted to build a force, he couldn't rely on just the few of them. But now that Peerless Island had become a middle-grade spirit island, he didn't need to recruit people like that anymore. He only needed to say a word, and many people would take the initiative to come over. It could be said that in the past, he was the one who spent spiritual jades to beg people to come over and help. But now, things were different. Even if others wanted to come in, he had to see if they were sincere and whether they were strong enough. Take the Constellation Hall's early-stage cultivators who were recruited from Zhaolai Island as an example. Originally, they didn't have much of a sense of identity with Peerless Island. They were just working for their monthly salary. But now, everyone was full of energy and enthusiasm. These people went to Zhaolai Island because they were poor people. They didn't have much spiritual jades on hand and were willing to be recruited just for the monthly salary. Now that Peerless Island was a middle-grade spirit island, the energy on the island was enough to satisfy their cultivation needs. Where else could they find such a good deal? After getting Chu Shen's permission, Ghost sent a message out. Her eyes curved as she smiled and said to Chu Shen, "Don't worry, this friend of mine is not ordinary. Island Master, you've met him before." Chu Shen thought for a moment and immediately realized who it was. If it was that person, then he was really not ordinary. His ranking on the Constellation Hall's ranking was even higher than Ghost's. Now he had 2 more generals under his command. As expected, the Pharaoh was the one who loved his people. If not for the Pharaoh, why would these 2 strong cultivators come to him to seek refuge? In an instant, Chu Shen felt that Peerless Island's future was promising. Since she had decided to gain a foothold on Peerless Island, Ghost naturally had to investigate this spirit island thoroughly. The spirit island wasn't small, but under the investigation of the late Constellation Hall's experts, she finished investigating very quickly. At this moment, Ghost was floating in midair in front of a rock wall at the side of the island. She looked at a dark cave in front of her and frowned. She felt that someone had set up a restriction inside, but she didn't know who was hiding here. Her figure flashed and she silently landed in the cave. After looking around carefully, she started trying to break the restriction in front of her. As an outstanding ghost cultivator, this kind of thing wasn't difficult for her. As she was trying to break the restriction, Ghost suddenly felt the restriction open on its own. Then she looked up and saw a figure sitting cross-legged in the depths of the cave, staring at her expressionlessly. The light was a little dim, so Ghost couldn't see the person's face clearly. However, the person's somewhat familiar gaze made her hair stand on end. She quickly took a step back and put on her guard. "Fa Wuzuan. What are you shouting for?" Lu Yi asked. Lu Yi had already sensed this person when he came. If Ghost was going to stay on Peerless Island in the future, they would have to meet each other. Therefore, Lu Yi had no intention of hiding and simply opened the restriction of the cave. Ghost felt that the voice wasn't right. After looking carefully, she realized that the person in front of her looked familiar and wasn't Fa Wuzuan. She was surprised. "Li Taibai? Why are you here?" Lu Yi said casually, "Why can't I be here?" Ghost obviously misunderstood. She understood and said, "So you're from Peerless Palace too?" She walked in slowly and looked around. Then, she sat cross-legged not far in front of Lu Yi and asked curiously, "Since you're from Peerless Palace, why are you staying in such a simple place? It's quieter here. You, on the other hand, why are you here?" Ghost said, "I'll be wherever I want to be. Why do you care?" She wouldn't say that she was forced here by Fa Wuzuan, although the result was not bad. She changed the topic. "You're at the later stage of Constellation Realm? Your cultivation progress is quite fast. It's a pity. If you were at the later stage of Constellation Realm before the Constellation Palace battle, you might be able to fight for a place in the rankings." Lu Yi said indifferently, "There are countless strong people on the rankings. I'm afraid I can't compete with them with my strength." Ghost smiled. "At least you know your place. There were many people at the later stage of Constellation Realm, but how many of them left their names on the rankings? Ordinary people at the later stage of Constellation Realm were indeed not qualified to fight for a place in the rankings." While laughing, Ghost's brows furrowed as she looked Lu Yi up and down, her face filled with bewilderment. What's wrong? Lu Yi looked at her. Ghost was silent for a moment before she said in a low voice, looking at you, you look like someone else I know. Not only was her figure similar, her gaze was similar, even her temperament was similar. She suddenly remembered that Li Taibai was an armament cultivator, and so was Fa Wuzuan. Ghost suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Oh, who's that? Ghost stared at Lu Ye's eyes without blinking, as if she wanted to see through Lu Ye's heart. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, he's a despicable, shameless, sinister, and cunning person. He's my lifelong enemy. Lu Yi looked thoughtful. It seems like that person is very strong. Ghost said, he is indeed very strong, much stronger than me. But he shouldn't have offended me. What will happen to those who offend you? Heh. Ghost sneered. That's hard to say. But after I become Yu Yao, I'll beat him up until he kneels and calls for his mother. Lu Yi nodded. Call me when the time comes. I'll go and watch the show. You still want to put on an act? Ghost suddenly jumped up in anger and pointed at Lu Ye's nose. Show your true face, Fa Wuzuan. I've already recognized you. Although your disguise is good, don't think you can fool my eyes. Lu Yi looked surprised. Fa Wuzuan? The Fa Wuzuan who shone in the Chaotic War Conference? Keep pretending. Ghost sneered. Although she didn't know why Li Taibai's disguise as Fa Wuzuan was flawless, some things couldn't stand up to scrutiny. Lu Yi shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Ghost saw that Lu Yi refused to admit it. She raised her hand and took out her musical note. I'd like to see how long you can be so stubborn. After saying this, he found Fa Wuzuan's musical imprint and sent out a message. Then he looked at Lu Yi with an air of complacency, as if he wanted to expose his ugly face. If Li Taibai was really Fa Wuzuan, then he wouldn't dare to reply in front of her. In this way, she could confirm his identity. But what surprised Ghost was that after a moment, there was a reply from the musical note. She hurriedly checked and found that it was really Fa Wuzuan's reply. It was only a simple sentence. What's the matter? Ghost was completely dumbfounded. She had been staring at Lu Yi and didn't see any strange movements from him. It was impossible for him to secretly reply. Then what was with Fa Wuzuan's reply? He couldn't have asked someone else to help him reply. Musical notes were for everyone's own use. It was impossible for others to use them. Could it be that she was wrong? Li Taibai was Li Taibai, and Fa Wuzuan was Fa Wuzuan? But how could there be two people so similar in this world? While she was lost in thought, Fa Wuzuan sent another message. Ghost could only reply, nothing, just checking to see if you're dead. I think you're itching for a beating. Ghost couldn't help but twitch her eyes and quickly put away the musical note. End of chapter. Chapter 1487. Strange, it's really strange. Ghost scratched her head, a puzzled look on her face. No matter how she looked at it, Li Taibai and Fa Wuzuan were almost the same except for their different looks and voices. This was why she had made such a judgment. But reality proved that they were not the same person. Were there really two people who were so similar in this world? Is there anything else? Lu Yi looked at her. Ghost shook her head. She didn't have anything special to ask, she was just curious about who had set up the restriction here. Lu Yi raised his hand and gestured for her to go ahead. Ghost curled her lips and turned around to leave. She had only taken a few steps when she suddenly recalled something. She turned around and said, "Oh right, I've also called Parker over. He's quite pitiful. He couldn't return home all these years and has been wandering around. The Matchless Island is not bad. If he can stay here, he'll have a home in this vast 10,000 elephant sea." After Ghost finished speaking, she left. Lu Yi was a little surprised. She didn't expect Ghost to call Puku. Lu Yi had thought about calling Puku over to Matchless Island. Matchless Island was short of people, and Puku was quite strong. If he could come to Matchless Island, he would definitely strengthen the foundation of Matchless Island. However, his identity here was a little special, so it was not convenient for him to do so. Most importantly, he wasn't sure if Pu Ku would be willing to come. Pu Ku and Chu Shen could be considered as his only two good friends in the Wanxiang galaxy. However, Lu Yi wasn't very clear about Pu Ku's background. He could only confirm that this guy had an extraordinary background based on their past interactions. It was impossible for someone with an extraordinary background like him to not have a place to stay in the Wanxiang Sea. They usually belonged to some force, but Pu Ku had always been alone, which was strange. Now, there was no need to worry about it. Ghost had called Pu Ku. If Pu Ku was willing to come, it would be best. If not, Lu Yi didn't need to make any unnecessary attempts. On another deserted island less than half a day's journey from Matchless Island, Lu Ye's doppelganger was sitting upright. After instructing Ghost to go to Matchless Island, Lu Yi expected that Ghost would have doubts about his identity, so he had his doppelganger hold Fa Wuzuan's musical note and wait here. Sure enough, Ghost wanted to use the musical note to determine that Lu Yi was Fa Wuzuan. It was true that other people wouldn't be able to use the musical notes, but the doppelganger could use them. This way, Spectre's doubts could be dispelled. In the cave, not long after Ghost left, Chu Shen came again and told Lu Yi some bad news. Senior brother, our Matchless Island might be attacked. As expected. Lu Yi nodded. Translator's note. Events a person's names. Calm. As the saying goes, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. When a force was not strong enough to occupy a spiritual island, it was natural for others to want to snatch it away. Especially recently, several forces had sent people to investigate the situation on Wushuang Island, both openly and secretly. Obviously, they were trying to find out the truth. He had brought Tang Jun here long ago to prepare for this moment. With Yu Yao around, the spiritual island's ability to protect itself was completely different from without Yu Yao. What are you going to do? Lu Yi asked. Of course I'm going to guard the island. I'll kill whoever dares to snatch it. Chu Shen's expression was cold. He wanted to do something. The Matchless Island could be said to be his best chance. Naturally, he would not let it go easily. But it seems like you can't make use of the power from Che Ling boundary. Chu Shen said, it doesn't matter. Right now, we can't hide the fact that the Peerless Island is reviving. However, those slightly more powerful forces all want to save face. Previously, there were some forces who sent people to contact me wanting to recruit us, but I rejected them all. Therefore, these forces won't make a move casually. Right now, those who can't wait to make a move on the Peerless Island are all unrated forces. These forces did not have a suitable base in the Vientiane Sea. Seeing that the Matchless Island was being revived, they were naturally tempted. They were like hungry dogs fighting for food. Even if it was a bone without any meat, it would still be tempting. Hence, even if a force were to attack the Matchless Island, their overall ability would not be too strong. This was also the reason why Chu Shen decided to guard the island. If some forces were to attack the Matchless Island, Matchless Palace would not be able to defend the island with their current ability. Another point was that the forces might not be unaware of Chu Shen's background. It was not worth it to offend an expert like Jiao Yen for the sake of a spiritual island. Only those mediocre forces who were not aware of Chu Shen's identity would have thoughts that they should not have. It's no secret that Tang Jun is on the Matchless Island. If they dare to make a move, they definitely have the ability to suppress Tang Jun. It's better to be careful. Chu Shen said, I know. However, my mother told me before that among the forces on the Vientiane Sea, other than some of the major forces, there are very few Yu Yao late-stage experts. This is because those who have cultivated to the late stage of Yu Yao are all focused on studying how to break through to the Rizhao stage. How would they have the time to guard the Vientiane Sea? Hence, most of the Yu Yao in the Vientiane Sea are either early or middle stage experts. Elder Tang Jun has the cultivation of a middle stage Yu Yao. If they want to suppress him, they will have to send out 1 or 2 early stage Yu Yao. This way, the pressure we have to face will be much less. Lu Yi nodded. Since you have a plan, then go ahead and do it. However, don't force yourself. If the disparity in strength is too great, it's fine to give up the Matchless Island. Without the Matchless Island, he could build another spiritual island. He would just have to start from scratch. I know. However, senior brother, I would like to ask for some support from you. Lu Yi did not say anything. He silently took out some formation plates and handed them to Chu Shun. Chu Shun received them happily. Thank you, big brother. This guy did not even bother to hide anymore. 2 days later, Pu Ku, who had received Ghost's invitation, rushed to the Matchless Island. Ghost's message was vague. It was not until Pu Ku entered the Matchless Island that he realized how extraordinary it was. When he heard that this spiritual island was just a deserted island 2 months ago, he was even more shocked. Realizing the huge potential of the unparalleled island in the future, Pu Ku decided to stay. To him, an ordinary spiritual island wouldn't be able to attract him. However, the unparalleled island was different. He wanted to see with his own eyes what this spiritual island would be like in the future. Of course, there was another reason. This place was not far from the fishing island. When the fishing season was over and Bai Ling returned, it would be very convenient for him to go fishing again. When he found out that Li Taibai was here, he happily came to visit. In the cave, Lu Yi received him warmly. After chatting for a while, Ghost came over to join in the fun. She was overjoyed when she talked about how she had mistakenly thought that Li Taibai was Fa Wuzuan. While the three of them were chatting, a sudden buzzing sound came from outside. The loud sound reverberated throughout the Matchless Island, causing their eardrums to tremble. The three of them looked at each other and dashed out of the cave. When they looked up, they saw a group of people standing in the air outside the protective formation of the Matchless Island. There were at least 100 of them. They were led by a man and a woman. Both of them had the cultivation of Yu Yao. The man, in particular, was in the mid-stage Yu Yao. At that moment, he had his hands behind his back and was looking down coldly. On the Matchless Island, a group of Matchless Palace cultivators rushed out after the commotion. They gathered together and looked at the newcomers nervously. Chu Shun stood at the front of the group. Behind him was Tang Jun, who had his eyes lowered and his hands hidden in his sleeves. In terms of formation, the Matchless Palace was undoubtedly at a great disadvantage. Not only was there a huge difference in numbers, but their overall strength was also incomparable. The other side had 2 Yu Yao cultivators, while the Matchless Palace only had 1. The other side had close to 100 Lunar Mansion cultivators. Almost 10 of them were in the late stage, and half of them were in the mid-stage. On the other hand, the Matchless Palace had more than 20 people, and all of them were in the early stage. 2 days ago, Chu Shun had told Lu Yi that the Matchless Island was likely to be attacked, so he was not surprised to see this scene. Those who had set their sights on the Matchless Island now would not be too strong. If they could not even handle such a small situation, how could the Matchless Island establish itself on the Vientiane Sea in the future? He stood at the front of the group and shouted in an imposing manner, "Who are you?" The mid-stage Yu Yao cultivator leading the group said slowly, "Carp Island's Nanxingzhen." Chu Shun looked carefree and did not show any mercy with his words. "What bullshit Carp Island? I've never heard of it. Why you here? Why have you triggered the protective formation of the Matchless Island?" Since they knew that they were not here with good intentions, there was no need to be polite. Moreover, they triggered the formation as soon as they arrived. That was how the loud noise was caused. They were indeed arrogant. Nanxingzhen did not mind and said indifferently, "Of course we are here for important matters. I wonder who is in charge of your island? Please come forward to discuss." Although he said that, his eyes were fixed on Tang Jun. He probably thought that Tang Jun was the one in charge of the Matchless Island. This was an indisputable judgment. Among this group of lunar mansions, there was only one Yu Yao. Naturally, Yu Yao would be in charge. Chu Shun shouted, "Old man, I think your eyes are blurry. I am talking to you, and you are asking who is in charge. I am the island master of the Matchless Island, the palace master of the Matchless Palace." Nanxingzhen frowned, obviously surprised. He turned to look at one of the lunar mansions at the side and transmitted his voice to ask something. The lunar mansions replied. Nanxingzhen nodded slightly, as if confirming Chu Shen's identity. He then looked at Chu Shen and said, "Since you are the island master of the Matchless Island, I will get straight to the point. The Carp Island has taken a liking to this spiritual island and intends to take over it. Chapter 1488. Ha! Chu Shen chuckled. Old man, you're being unreasonable. Why should I give up my treasures just because you've taken a fancy to me? I've even taken a fancy to your wife. Are you going to give up your treasures or not? Cold sweat dripped down the foreheads of the newly recruited constellations. They felt that their palace lord was truly audacious. He actually dared to speak to a mid-stage Yu Yao in such a manner. Little did they know that Chu Shen was of noble birth, and his mother was a sunshine expert. Yu Yao had seen countless sunshine experts, so she wasn't too afraid of Yu Yao. If Nan Xingzhen was like this, he really wouldn't be able to put on airs in front of him. Behind Chu Shen, the woman named Han Si frowned. She couldn't help but glance at Chu Shen, as if she couldn't understand how this brat could even say such shameless words. Even if the other party didn't come with good intentions, there were some things that could be said and some things that couldn't be said in a battle between cultivators. Many tragedies were caused by careless talk. Impudent! Nan Xingzhen shouted. The woman beside him also glared at Chu Shen with a cold gaze. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. Impudent your mother! Chu Shen didn't have the bearing of a palace lord at all. He stomped his foot and scolded, "If you want to fight, then hurry up and fight. Stop being so pretentious and annoying." Nan Xingzhen nodded slightly. He didn't want to waste any more words with Chu Shen. Instead, he looked at the constellations behind Chu Shen and said, "Do you all want to be buried together with this ignorant junior? If anyone is willing to leave now, this old man can spare his life." Attacking the enemy's mind was the key. Nan Xingzhen was old and experienced, so he naturally understood this principle. Even if his side was far stronger than the Peerless Island, one side was attacking while the other was defending. If he could divide the other side's strength with words, he could also reduce some unnecessary resistance. Especially when he knew that the unparalleled palace had just been established not long ago. These constellations were all recruited from the recruitment island and had no loyalty to speak of. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Shen opened his mouth and said, "Everyone, although this old man is a little ugly, what he said is right. If anyone wants to leave now, this island master can open the array and let them leave. Of course, if you are willing to stay and work together with me, that would be the best. However, if you are willing to stay but still try to be sneaky, or even secretly do something disagreeable, then don't blame this palace master for being impolite. Whatever you choose, I, Chu Shen, will not force you." His words surprised Nan Xingzhen quite a bit. He had lived for so many years, but he had never seen anything like this. Now was the time to gather people's hearts. Even if they had to offer generous conditions, they had to move people and make them stay and work hard. Why would they take the initiative to let people go? As expected, he was still young and naive. Indeed, there were people who were hesitating. On the surface, the difference in their strength was too big. Even if they were in a defensive position, it would be difficult for them to win this battle. Once they lost, the defensive array would be broken and their fate would be worrying. Hence, after a moment of hesitation, someone looked ashamed and cupped his fists towards Chu Shen. "I'm sorry, Palace Master." Chu Shen was not disappointed and only nodded slightly. "It's human nature. Brother, you don't have to take it to heart." He raised his hand and pointed, "Which direction do you want to go? I will open the array and let you leave." That person hurriedly rushed towards the direction Chu Shen pointed. A few people cupped their fists and bowed, following closely behind that person. Seeing this, Nan Xingzhen struck while the iron was hot. "I will give you 10 breaths of time. If you insist on stubbornly resisting, when the island is broken, it will be the day of your death." Once this was said, a few more people left. Chu Shen was expressionless. After those people reached the designated location, he opened a gap in the array and let them leave the unparalleled island. "Is there anyone else who wants to leave?" he asked. From Zhaolai Island, he had recruited more than 20 constellations. Now there were only 7 left. It could be said that more than half of them had left. No one moved. Chu Shen found it strange. because he clearly felt that among the people who stayed, everyone was nervous and looked very scared. Yet they did not move. "Why aren't you leaving?" He looked at the remaining people in confusion. Someone's expression stiffened and said, "Palace Master, where can we go if we leave? Are we still going to Zhaolai Island to work and live a life of hunger and hunger? I've had enough of those days. Rather than going to Zhaolai Island, I might as well stay and fight." Chu Shen laughed. "Aren't you afraid that they will kill you when the island is broken?" That person wiped the cold sweat on his face. "But so what if I am afraid? The path of cultivation is full of obstacles. Where is there no danger? Furthermore, Palace Master, you look like you are unmoving like a mountain. It seems like you have other plans." "Palace Master, our cultivation is similar. If you are not afraid, then I can only not be afraid." "Is that what all of you think?" Chu Shen looked at the others. Everyone nodded. Someone even asked, "Palace Master, do we still have powerful reinforcements hiding in the dark?" Otherwise, how could Chu Shen be so calm? Chu Shen did not deny it. He laughed loudly. "Very good. From now on, all of you will be my Chu Shen's sworn brothers. In the future, as long as you have a piece of spirit jade from me, Chu Shen, I will not let you suffer." He suddenly turned to look at the woman called Hansi. "You want to stay too? Is there a problem?" Hansi asked back. "No problem." Chu Shen smiled brightly. Those early constellations were willing to stay because they guessed that he had some plans. Hence, they decided to take a gamble. He did not understand what this Hansi was thinking. But to him, this was a good thing. Hansi was a late-stage constellation cultivator. She was not weak. She could increase their strength if she stayed. The world is full of fools. There is a way to live, but you don't want to take it. Since that is the case, this old man will satisfy you. Nan Xingzhen snorted coldly. He waved his hand, and the many constellations behind him scattered. In an instant, the spiritual power in the air became chaotic. Multicolored rays of light started to bloom, fiercely crashing down on the protective formation. Rumbling sounds rang out continuously. The entire Supreme Parallel Island was shaking, and ripples appeared on the protective formation's light screen. How lively! On one side of the Supreme Parallel Island, Pu took a swig of wine from his wine gourd. "I didn't expect to see such a lively scene as soon as I arrived." Yu Ling sneered, "You should still be able to make it if you leave now. This spiritual island is not bad. I plan to stay here for a while." Pu put away his wine gourd. "However, if Island Master does not have any other plans, then we might have to go and fight Yu Yao." As he spoke, he looked at the woman at the early stage of Yu Yao. The other side had 2 Yu Yao, while they only had 1. Tang Jun could restrain Nan Xingzhen, but the woman Yu Yao was out of his league. If she really attacked without restraint, no matter how strong the protective formation of the Supreme Parallel Island was, it would still be broken. "I remember that dried skeleton general." Ling Yun's expression was bitter. "That guy was not the real Yu Yao, but he almost wiped us out. This woman is the real Yu Yao. We are no match for her. Besides," she glanced at Lu Yi, "he is not Fa Wuzuan." Pu nodded. "You're right. However, this place is not the tomb. There is more space to move around." "Have you decided?" Ling Yun asked. "I have no choice, but you still have a choice." She had been brought here by Fa Wuzuan. Fa Wuzuan was Chu Shen's big brother. If she did not do her best to protect the island, Fa Wuzuan would definitely not let her go. Pu smiled. "When have you ever seen me indecisive?" Lu Yi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly flipped his hand. An item appeared in his palm. "Who will take the lead?" The two of them immediately looked over. Ling Yun was stunned. "Why do you have this?" It was a twin chi-linked branch array disc. "The Island Master gave it to me," Lu Yi blurted out. Ling Yun and Pu did not doubt him. With Chu Shen's relationship with Fa Wuzuan, obtaining a few formation discs from Fa Wuzuan was no big deal. "Then this is a good idea." Ling Yun nodded slightly. Initially, she had thought that even if the 3 of them worked together, they would still be no match for Yu Yao. At most, they would only be able to hold her back for a while. Moreover, there was still a huge risk involved. However, if they had the help of a formation disc, they might be able to put up a fight. I am a ghost cultivator. I am not suitable. Pu Ku also said, you are a weapon cultivator. You will take the lead. This was Lu Ye's original plan, so he naturally had no objections. Although the battle against the dried skeleton general had been very difficult, he had been using the Crimson Dragon Saber at the time, which had affected his strength slightly. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the middle stage of the constellation realm. Now that his strength had increased, with the three of them in a formation, dealing with an early stage Yu Yao might not be a problem. However, that woman seemed to be a Dharma cultivator. Therefore, they had to be on guard against her having any strange secret arts or Dharma treasures. The spiritual island buzzed incessantly. Nan Xingzhen revealed a shocked expression. It was only now that he realized that the defensive formation of Peerless Island was a little unusual. He had thought that such a defensive formation could be easily broken. Who knew that the level of the formation was so high and its defenses so strong? To set up such a large formation, the cost would not be small. What kind of background did the people of Peerless Palace have? What he did not know was that Chu Shen had taken 5 million spirit jades from Lu Yi. A total of 4 million spirit jades had been invested in setting up the formation, leaving only 1 million spirit jades as backup. How could such a large formation not be strong? It could be said that Peerless Island's current formation was made entirely out of spirit jades. Moreover, the island's cosmic energy was abundant. If it was set up a little longer and the formation absorbed enough cosmic energy, its defensive power would definitely become even stronger. The current formation of Peerless Island in terms of level and scale might not be as good as the high-class spiritual islands occupied by some big factions. However, it was definitely far ahead of the low-class spiritual islands. The only shortcoming was that the formation had been set up for too short a time, and the energy stored was not enough. Nan Xingzhen obviously knew about this, so he concluded that the formation would not be able to last for too long. As long as they continued to attack, the formation would be broken sooner or later. Amidst the buzzing, Chu Shen called out to the people who stayed behind and did a head count. Including Little Dumb, Crooked Tooth, and the others, there were a total of 13 people at the early stage of the constellation realm. With a flip of his hand, he took out a few formation discs and distributed them. It's not enough to just take a beating and not fight back. Everyone, find the core of the formation and counterattack however you want. The group's eyes lit up. After receiving the formation discs, they immediately split up and took action. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.